Well, hello there, little masters, and welcome once again to the Prancing Pony Podcast, where tonight we're loading up the good stuff in casks and sailing west.
West to Hall, my friends. I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, the Aragorn to my Aemir, Alan Sisto.
Thank you, Sean. Well, folks, we hope you enjoyed our special episode last week when we had a chance to sit down and talk with John Garth. We were really honored to have him on the show. But tonight we're going to go back to the Silmarillion and finally starting the Second Age in the first of two episodes on the Akallabêth. Here we finally get to the story of Númenor.
Ah, yes, Númenor, that place that Tolkien mentions a few times in The Lord of the Rings, just sort of teasing us with its existence, but never actually saying anything about it until you read the appendices.
Which you should read, of course.
Well, of course. But if you didn't, good news. It's actually given here in a bit more detail. Instead of just listing out all the kings and queens, you'll get a little bit of a story about it. And you'll notice something different about this story. We're finally in the realms of men here.
That's true. Even though men have been on the scene for a long time now, they've been walking around in a Middle-earth still ruled by those elves. That starts to change.
Yes, it does. It'll be a long time before men truly have dominion over Middle-earth. I mean, I guess until the end of the Third Age, really.
Yeah.
But this story is
Two
the
more
first
ages.
glimpse of what that's going to look like. Really, the good and the bad of that.
Well, and the ugly. So let's get to it as soon as we can.
Quite true.
But
Very
before
true.
we do we have anything from Barliman's bag today?
Yes, we do, sir. First of all,
Very good.
in our last regular episode, the one about Eärendil, we talked about Aragorn and Arwen being cousins, but we struggled to think about how many generations of removal there were between the two of them.
Right.
I was looking in the bag, and I saw that Bethany in Oklahoma wrote into us a few months ago asking us this exact question, saying, Aragorn and Arwen are first cousins many times removed, but how many times? So I figured, well, let me...
she'd answered that question for us rather than
I know, it would have
asking.
been nice if she'd helped us. Well, yeah, she asked us long before we stumbled over it last time. But
That's true.
short answer is 64. 64 times removed.
Wow,
And,
that's a few.
Yeah, quite a few. The long answer, for those who, like me, can't remember can't remember what the difference is between a second cousin and a first cousin once removed.
True.
Here's an explanation of how I got to that number. So Elrond and Elros were brothers. So that means that Arwen and Elros's son Vardamir were first cousins, right?
Because each of them was descended from a brother. So
Right,
okay.
exactly.
So they're on the same level of
They're on the
family tree.
same generation, the same line
Okay.
of the same row of the family tree, if you will. So then Vardamir's son, Tar Amandil, would have been Arwen's first cousin once removed, because the removals are generations of
Generational.
separation.
Gotcha.
Yep. So every generation younger than Arwen and Vardamir is going to be one more removal.
So then how
So
do
we
you
can
get to
basically-
second cousins then? And then third cousins and stuff.
So second cousins are when you are when the common ancestor is a generation further up.
Oh, okay. So if it would be like
So,
if
like-
Arwen's child, whose name now escapes me, the one she
Eldarion.
has with Aragorn, would have been second cousins with Vardamir if he hadn't been dead for 4,000 years.
I think so. Yeah.
Or I mean Tar Amandil. Sorry.
Right.
I
Yeah,
see.
I think
Okay.
so. Yeah, it's basically, yeah, you have to go further up to find that common ancestor.
Gotcha. Okay.
I hope
well,
I got
that's
that right.
interesting. I think you did. No, you did actually. I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure you had it.
Yeah.
I was
You wanted to make
testing
sure I knew what I was talking about. It
I
was a
was
test.
testing you.
I passed the test.
You did.
I will go into the West
And remain,
and remain Sean.
Sean.
So anyway,
Oh, man.
so how
gotta
I got
use
to the
that.
number, I know, how I got to the number 64. So remember that Aragorn descends from not the royal line, but a lesser line, right? A lesser, a lesser
a
sibling.
line that should have been, because later on they ended up having ruling queens, and the ancestor
Yes.
in his line would have been a ruling queen had that been the law at the time.
That's
but
right.
It wasn't.
That was Silmarillion, wasn't it?
I believe so. We'll get to
Yeah.
her tonight. I think we'll get to
Yes, I
a
think we
brief
will.
mention of her.
Yeah. So we don't know exactly how many generations there were, but if we assume that they had children at roughly the same age, then let's just count the kings and queens of Númenor, and that's about as close as we can get.
Sure.
So 25 rulers of Númenor. So let's see, 25 rulers of Númenor. So so we've got 23 generations there because we're actually counting from the second one.
Right. That makes sense. So 23.
and then-
okay.
And then we've got 10 kings of Arnor.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 33 times removed. We've got 15 kings of Arthedain. So that gets us to 48 times removed. And then we've got 16 chieftains of the Rangers, including Aragorn. So that's 64 times removed.
My goodness. Or thereabouts.
I think that's right.
I mean, it could be 63 or 66 or something, but it certainly means they're not much more closely related than you and about half the people in your town.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I mean, they're,
it's pretty distant.
They're cousins. Well, I mean, hey, look, we know elves and we'll see men have pretty strong taboos against first cousins, but I mean, they're so far
first
removed.
Cousins, certainly, and even seconds, but
they're just so far
times
removed. I mean, there's been a lot of other blood that's been,
mixed into that Aragorn is, his elvish blood is so minute.
Yeah,
I mean, it's present, and that's that's an excellent thing for him. But it's not like they got to worry about their kids having hemophilia or whatever else the royal family.
Exactly. So thank you, Bethany, for that one, and for giving us a chance to do a little bit of math, which is always a scary proposition for me.
Boy, you're not kidding.
And I hope you like that
too.
answer. And we do have one more question if we've got time for it here, Alan. We got one from our old friend Tarek in Chicago. Tarek recently reminded me that I've been mispronouncing his name. I think I've been saying Tarek, and it's actually Tarek. So I am very sorry, Tarek. Thank you for being very nice in your email.
Maybe we should just call him Mr. T. Pity the fool. Pity the fool.
Yep.
Drink your milk.
Eat your Mr. T's cereal. So, anywho,
sadly, he's probably too young to know much about the A-Team, but
he might be. He might be. Tarek, let us know if you remember Mr. T's cereal. If you have any idea what we're talking about, we'll chat about that.
We just lost 90% of our audience right there. What? Who?
Anyway, so Tarek wrote in asking about Eärendil. He said, if the Vial of Galadriel holds the light of the Star of Eärendil, why couldn't the phial be used by the Valar to try and restore the trees? Is it because it's too much of an imitation in comparison to a Silmaril, or was it hidden on purpose from the Valar? I think, was it hidden from the Valar purposely?
No, first of all, I'm so sorry. I can't get it out of my head. I just want to say, in 1972, a crack commando unit was sent to prison by a military court for a crime they didn't commit. At least I think it's as best as I can remember.
That's pretty good.
And maybe you can hire the A-Team. Well, it only took us 8 minutes to digress. Right on.
I know, and it only took us 40-something episodes to get in an A-Team reference.
Boy, you're not kidding. That took a long time. I mean, we should have referenced them with I'm thinking the skinny bows that couldn't really shoot very well, because we know the A-Team can hit the broadside of a barn.
That's right.
Anyway. Kind of like, I think if you take off stormtrooper helmets, you'll find they're all members of the A-Team.
I'm surprised that we didn't get to it with Olmo, and then I love when a plan comes together.
Oh boy, you're not kidding. You are not kidding. Okay, well now back to Tarek's question, because at some point we have to do our jobs.
We're going to have to talk about Tolkien at some point tonight.
At some point we should. So I'd say really in terms of the Star of Eärendil, it's a matter of both. In terms of the file, it's a matter of both quantity and quality. First, the light is, diluted, for lack of a better word. Here's the line from the text. In this file, she said, is caught the light of Eärendil's star, set amid the waters of my fountain. So it's in water. So it's not the pure light that was in the Silmarils themselves. But
it's actually the reflection of the light in the water that's been captured in the file. Yeah,
exactly. So it's not the original light. It's a reflection of the light.
Mm-hmm.
But even if it was pure, like the light of the Silmarils itself, it's a quantity issue too. The file is really small. It's small enough for a hobbit shirt pocket, so it seems unlikely there'd be enough. So both quantity and quality. But
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
I think really it's the quality of the light to begin with. I mean, it's awesome, but it's not Eärendil awesome.
Few things are.
Few things are. Perhaps me on a very good day. But let's not forget.
I wouldn't go that far for either of us.
No, I wouldn't either. I really wouldn't. We just talked about this episode. It was, I think, really what we understand now is the Valar themselves placed Eärendil and the Silmaril into the sky as the morning star. So if Yavanna had thought that the light from one Silmaril would have been enough to restore the trees, she probably would have raised her hand and said, "Excuse me, Manwë, can we
guys,
talk?
Right.
So if
guys,
know,
I have another idea.
can we take a vote?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I think this idea of it being a reflection, I think, is really compelling. You said that really makes me think. I mean, it's ultimately a reflection of a reflection of the tree light, because the Silmarils were imprisonment of the tree light, which is a kind of reflection, right? It's a duplicate. It's like a copy.
Right. Yeah.
And then this is a copy of the copy. And I mean, depending on how much you want to make of the dust of elven gems that covered Eärendil, who knows? Maybe it's even maybe it's even the light reflecting off of that to
That's
magnify
true.
it. I don't know. So it's a copy of a copy. There's no way that it would be pure enough, I don't think, to heal the trees. But I think also the quantity of it is interesting as well.
Yeah.
But what that's really interesting though, because it kind of illustrates the vast difference between what's exceedingly bright by Middle Earth standards and what's exceedingly bright by Aman standards.
Oh, wow, good point. Absolutely,
I mean,
good point.
The file is one of the brightest things we could probably imagine in mortal lands, but it pales in comparison to what the light of those trees was.
Absolutely, that's a good point. Well, I think we answered that one, so we've got two down.
Good questions, Mark. Thank you very much.
Very much. Without any further ado, then let's go ahead and move on with today's discussion. Before we get into the chapter itself, Sean, do you want to do what you've done for the last few stories and give us a quick intro to the Akallabêth?
I'll do a little bit. I really want to make this brief so we can get into the story.
Okay.
But I feel like I need to say a few words.
Your definition of brief may be different than mine. I don't know.
I think it has historically been, yeah.
You keep on using that word.
I don't think it means what you think it means. So the Akallabêth, or the downfall of Númenor, is the only complete story we have from the Second Age. We've got some fun stuff in the Unfinished Tales, which I think you're going to bring in some of tonight. Yeah, but this is the only one that's complete, and that's because it's really important to the Legendarium. Tolkien called it the missing link between the First Age, sort of the mythological First Age, and the more historical, fantastical Third Age. And so it is a really important part of it, which I think is why Christopher Tolkien included it in this collection. Yeah. It picks up right where the First Age leaves off, but it is very different in tone and in theme from the Quenta Silmarillion. And I think that's because it's really firmly in the world of men, as we said in the introduction. This is a mannish kingdom. These are mannish problems.
Boy, are
these are man problems. These aren't elf problems.
These aren't your elf problems.
Right, exactly.
These here are men problems.
Hashtag second age problems. And so the elves are present, sort of. They don't make too many appearances in this story, but they are there, but more and more in the background as time goes on.
That's
so
true.
I just kind of wanted to sort of set the stage a little bit for the very different tone here. That's really all I want to say right now, because going into my usual, here's the history of Tolkien's composition and all that stuff. To do all that, I'm going to have to spoil the end, and I don't want to do that.
We don't want to do that.
Yeah, so maybe next time we'll talk a little bit more about the history of the composition and stuff like that. But for now, we'll just get into it, and we'll save for later the question of sort of the significance to the Legendarium as a whole.
Okay, that makes sense. You're certainly right about the tone, and I think that fits with the whole missing link thing. The fact that it is a transition from that grand mythic set of tales, and a very personal narrative of the Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings.
The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings, right?
And, this is which is entirely character driven. This is much more. I mean, this is somewhere in between, right? It's a history like the Quenta, but it's a much more personal history and a mannish history, and
and I think it's more closely connected with mannish legends, the kind of legends that we grew up with in the real world, and that's all I'll say about that for now.
I see where you're going.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and dig in. The first thing we'd recommend, and unfortunately I don't have a place online to send you to, but do try to find a map of Númenor. Really the best one is the one that Tolkien provided in Unfinished Tales, and if you Google map of Númenor, you'll find that image someplace, and that would be a good source of reference. The other one would be in Karen Fonstad's Atlas of Middle-earth. That's another excellent map.
That's a good one. That's the one I've got in front of me, and that's
Yeah, those are the two I would look at. Unfortunately, Loader Project does not have a map of Númenor on it. So, okay,
maybe he needs more. Maybe he needs more donations.
More donations,
to sweeten the pot for him.
There
folks.
You go. Yeah, throw a few dollars his way. They do a tremendous job over at Loader Project. It's just one guy. I don't know how you.
Yeah, I know, it's amazing.
Guy, even though, but he codes that whole thing. Pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go ahead. We'll start out at the beginning as we always do because it is a very good place to start.
A very good place to start.
We won't read the first few paragraphs, but we will see something very interesting that Morgoth sent his emissaries among the men. They listened to his evil and cunning words, and they worshipped the darkness and yet feared it. Sean, you had a really interesting observation on that when we were talking about this.
Yeah, well, I just noticed it's the first time we see the word worship in the Silmarillion. I mean, we've got a story that has been, started out with God, the one God, and with God's little g gods. There's so much about the interactions there as a full creation myth and everything, but we never see anything about worship.
That's true.
We're only seeing it for the first time here in reference to men, and I think I just think that's key because again, we're in this place of men. It's almost it seems to me as though Tolkien is kind of implying that men worship.
Yeah.
Whereas elves, we never really saw elves worship. They spend a lot of time with the Valar. They certainly
OMG Manwë.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're right.
I don't know. It
the
almost
word
makes
we
me think
use
like
that we get a lot is reverence or to revere.
Yeah, that's true.
And I know that those are synonyms, but I think there's enough. There's the word worship is a little bit more loaded. I mean, at least it feels that way to me. I don't know. And I'm thinking of that obviously as somebody in 2017, and he might not have been thinking that, 100 years ago, or, well, no, he didn't write the Akallabêth 100 years ago, but just some of the earliest parts. But about 80. So but the words are synonyms. I mean, the dictionary definition of worship is to render religious reverence. So it is pretty similar.
Well, you're defining one in terms of another.
But I don't think it's an accident. Even though I can say they're synonyms, it is clear that there is never a word, the word worship is never used to describe how the elves treat the Valar. They do reverence them for sure. And we see, even in Lord of the Rings, Galadriel singing a hymn to Elbereth.
Right.
And who do you sing a hymn to? Well, you'd only sing a hymn to somebody you're worshiping. So
you're right.
It's by inference. But I think you're right. I think he does kind of point out here that men are quick to worship, to give worth to somebody greater than them.
Right. Yeah, and that's a good little bit of word nerdery because I looked into the etymology of the word, and you're right. It does come from this idea of giving worth.
Yeah.
It's interesting that, worship is the Anglo-Saxon word. Revere, reverence is a Latin-derived word.
You're right. I was going to mention that too.
You would think you would go to worship, but I think
that
the
makes
last
it even
thing I'll
less
say
likely that this was an accident.
That is very true. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's true. And I want to be clear. He's talking about worshiping the darkness here, but he doesn't just use it in a negative sense.
No.
In fact,
we will see shortly
passages,
that's not the case at all. Right.
Right. Exactly. So I don't think Tolkien is saying that, worship connotes something bad to him. I just think in this, it connotes something mannish, whatever that is.
Yeah, I think you're right. No, but that's a good point because worship is not always just related to Morgoth. So, or later on, sadly, Sauron.
Right.
Oh, did I just spoil something for next episode?
Oh,
I did. I forgot what we were breaking tonight.
That's all right.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. You know what?
Well, first-time readers hopefully have read the entire chapter.
It's only a couple of pages past where we're stopping today.
It really is. So, anyway, that was
doesn't end well, folks. That's why Downfall's in the title.
That's right. That's why it's called Downfall. Just like the fall of Gondolin was the downfall of Gondolin.
Right, it's not the autumn.
Not the red and orange leaves.
The leaves in Gondolin are so pretty this time of year.
In the fall. Well, they're being burnt up by dragons. So we see that some of these men, of course, this is just a recap of what we saw in the Silmarillion. The men went west following the rumor of the light. We get a recap of Arundel's errand, and we get, and I'm going to have Sean jump in on some word nerdery here. We get Rothinzil. Am I getting the Rothinzil? Okay,
I believe so. I believe it's Rothinzil. Yeah.
I wasn't sure where to put the emphasis on what syllable.
I think to answer that, I think the emphasis is on this. I think it goes on the penult. I've not seen anything that says that Adonai stress is different from Elvish stress. So
right.
I'm going with Elvish stress rules. Yeah. Yeah, and two consonants following the vowel of
Oh,
the
that's right.
penults. So
Yeah.
you got NZ following the I, so that means the stress is on the I. I think, but somebody correct me if it's
You know what?
Rothenzel. I can see that, but
Yeah, and let's just leave that out there, please, because we're moving into Adonaic,
yeah,
or Adonaic.
it's, we're gonna have a little trouble pronouncing it,
We're
aren't
gonna
we?
have a little trouble. We're gonna have
Starting
some
with the name
trouble.
of it, yeah,
Um,
yeah. No, it's
you
true.
know,
These are tough words,
these
and
are because there's
I
not
mean,
as much clarity as to which rules they follow.
right, right,
Whereas with the Elvish tongues, we really do get a pretty sound set of rules
yeah.
that it can be consistently applied. So
Yeah,
do feel
and to
free
be fair, I've
let
not
us know.
spent nearly as much time with the Adonaic material that's in I think it's History of Middle Earth Volume 9.
Yeah,
I've not
I
spent nearly as
haven't
much
gotten
time
there
with
yet.
that as anything else. Yeah.
No, we'll get there eventually.
Ooh, yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that word.
Yeah. So Rothinzil is the name that they're giving to Eärendil's ship, which we know as Vingalot.
Hmm.
And this is actually what linguists call a calque, or a word for word translation.
Hmm.
Basically, what they've done is they've taken each root of Vingalot and translated those two roots, and put those roots back together. So Vingalot means foam, flower. Ving is foam. Lot or lote is flower.
Okay.
Basically, all the Númenóreans did was they translated both of those. So Roth is foam,
Hmm.
and then Inzil is flower.
Oh,
So
okay.
foam, flower, Roth, Inzil. It's basically it has the exact same meaning as Vingalot, but in their own language.
Okay.
Uh, if you're interested in a little extra word nerdery here,
Well, and who wouldn't be?
and,
This is
right,
the Prancing Pony podcast.
you're listening
Sean.
to us
We're
after
all
all.
interested
So
in the extra word nerdery.
exactly, that's what we do here. So interestingly, that word Roth, which is Adonaic for foam, is
Hmm.
actually a derivative of the Sindarin word Ross,
Hmm.
which is in the name Elros, which means star foam. So,
Interesting.
so that was which I mean is the name of their first king, which we'll see in just a moment. So
Well, yeah,
I don't
we
know,
will.
just a neat. I didn't spoil that.
No,
People have already read
I
that.
don't think you did. You should know that Elros is the first king of Númenor. I think that
Since
really
we
should be
said
known
it,
by anybody.
I think we said it last episode anyway.
Yeah, I think
But
we did.
yeah,
So then there's a recap of the great battle, and then we get to see that men are forsaken. But I'm going to have Sean read that for us.
okay. Well, let me find it. Here we go.
Please do.
And after the victory of the lords of the west, those of the evil men who were not destroyed fled back into the east, where many of their race were still wandering in the unharvested lands, wild and lawless, refusing alike the summons of the Valar and of Morgoth. And the evil men came among them, and cast over them a shadow of fear, and they took them for kings. Then the Valar forsook for a time the men of Middle-earth who had refused their summons and had taken the friends of Morgoth to be their masters. And men dwelt in darkness, and were troubled by many evil things that Morgoth had devised in the days of his dominion, demons, and dragons, and misshapen beasts, and the unclean orcs that are mockeries of the children of Ilúvatar. And the lot of men was unhappy.
Boy, was it.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I guess if you're going to hang out with the wrong crowd, the Valar are just not going to. They're going to forsake you.
yeah,
You picked the wrong king, pal.
yeah.
Sad, but not
Yeah.
surprising. Not surprising. They've always kind of been very hands off when it came to the men.
Yeah, they have. And I think we've talked about before the idea. I mean, my idea, I think it's fairly clear in the Legendarium that the Valar are taking a more hands-off approach as time goes on. And we are
Yeah, absolutely.
we're getting to the Dominion of Men. And so they're really starting to wash their hands of it and just say,
Mhm.
well, okay,
Yeah,
we're going to just
They
kind of do
summoned
our
him.
own thing.
they summoned them.
Yeah, right,
You know?
exactly. We summoned you.
You don't want to
didn't have to.
come. We're not
You want
going
to come. We're not going to force you.
can lead a man to water.
Mhm.
Um,
But interesting.
yeah,
But
go ahead.
very interesting that, the ones who served Morgoth actually, go back and then, lord it over the rest.
Yeah.
It's, they've, we talk so much about ennoblement and how the Edain learned from the elves, and here we've got the evil men who have learned from Morgoth and his orcs, and
Yep.
they're going to take this, this wickedness back and, and rule as tyrants. It's really sad. It's
Well,
really,
they took the 6-week Morgoth leadership course, so they know how to go and, They watched a TED Talk from
the
from
Angband
Morgoth.
Retreat. Yeah, TED
The
Talk.
Angband retreat. Oh goodness.
Oh, man, it's a milk talk.
Milk Talk.
You too can be evil.
That's right.
Man.
Oh, goodness. I can just see him now. Well, he's selling life coaching sessions. And
Yeah, right. But what's really fascinating
connect
about
with him
this
on
is,
LinkedIn, because that's helpful.
Oh yeah, well definitely. You got to have a LinkedIn profile if you're going to be a wicked lord of men.
Oh, goodness. This is going to be a long one.
It is. What's really interesting about this, though, I mean, these bad guys come back and, use what they've learned in the West to, to be tyrants. Whereas when we see the Númenóreans come back in just a moment, they're going to bring culture and wisdom and technology. And it's interesting. It just underscores, I'm sorry. Yeah, for a time. Yes, that's true. Until they start to, well, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
We are getting ahead of ourselves. But you're right. That is an interesting comparison. So, folks, keep that in mind when we get there. You'll kind of see that difference. Yeah. Again, we won't read the next little bit, but Morgoth is put outside the world. We talked about way back in Ainulindalë that the world and Arda are not synonyms. Arda is in the world, but the world is the universe. The world is everything that is created. So Manwë has put Morgoth out in the void, which is outside of existence, outside of the universe. The only thing that's there are the timeless halls, at least the only things that we know of.
Right.
So he's not going to be able to get back into the world, into our universe, so to speak, while the Lords of the West are still enthroned.
That's an interesting point. I mean, the timeless halls are there, but presumably there are other things there because we know that
not
Melkor...
much. It's a void. Well, I mean, really,
there's other emptiness there. I guess what I'm thinking is the timeless halls is not the entire void, right?
No, of course not.
It's a place within the void, because Melkor used to go seeking for stuff in the void back in the music.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess what I'm getting at is, I don't think Morgoth was sent to Ilúvatar's office.
Oh no, not at all.
Chained up there, he was sent someplace.
In fact, I'm pretty sure he's not welcome there.
I'm right. No. Not even like go to the principal's office. I think it's just like, no, you're not coming anywhere near here.
Just leave the campus and you're done.
Right. Yeah. You're expelled, buddy.
Yeah. Forever and ever. Amen. But interesting, not surprising. The seeds that he had planted grew and sprouted, bearing evil fruit. Isn't that a beautiful line? I know I said we weren't going to read that, but I read it. That's too bad.
No, it's all right. That's what we do. It's a beautiful line for something horrible.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, so the will...
It reminds me a little bit of, I think I mentioned this in the last episode, but reminds me a little bit of Gandalf's line, the one about all we can do is deal with, I can't remember how he says it, but, make sure that future generations have good earth to till, but there will always be an evil spirit, something like that.
Yeah, there will always be, it's not up to us to determine the weather.
Yeah, that's it, yeah. I think it was in the last episode. Go listen to that last episode.
If you haven't listened to the last episode, please do.
Yeah.
So now, not only is the will of Morgoth still around, but now the elves have left, and the Valar have forsaken men, and now even the good men have gone. Well,
yeah.
So, by the way, the next time a friend asks you where have all the good men gone, you can just tell them Númenor. But it does kind of leave these guys in a bind, doesn't it?
They've gone west. They're in Númenor. Yeah, and it's
what a brutal world this is. This is,
truly. I mean,
it brings me back to something else from last episode. Remember when actually, I think it was from 2 episodes ago when we were talking about Tuor and how he, the reminder, when he was a thrall, and he was pushing. You were thinking of the tie-in with Conan, the barbarian.
Oh yeah.
Having to push the wheel of pain.
The wheel of pain.
And that's kind of what this makes me think. This is that really dark world. I mean, this is
it is a dark age,
brutal, unenlightened, uneducated, uninformed world. I mean, we see that. The men are wild and lawless. They're just wandering.
Yeah.
This is a bad time to be around.
This is a post-apocalyptic. In our modern parlance, this is kind of a post-apocalyptic world. Civilization has fallen. And it's not, well, it probably is pretty Mad Max-ish, actually, without all the cars.
I was thinking Fallout, but yeah.
It's like, it's that. It's civilization has fallen.
It's gone,
all the good people have gone, and all that's left are these warlords and criminals that are just going to use power to
absolutely
to lord it over others.
Absolutely. Well, fortunately, that's not the case for all men. So we're gonna see what happens with the good ones. I'm going to go ahead and pick up about halfway through this paragraph.
Okay.
When, therefore, Morgoth had been thrust forth, that's the Valar, they held counsel concerning the ages that should come after. The Eldar they summoned to return into the west, And those that hearkened to the summons dwelt in the isle of Eressia, and there is in that land a haven that is named Avallone, for it is of all cities the nearest to Valinor. And the tower of Avallone is the first sight that the mariner beholds, when at last he draws nigh to the Undying Lands over the leagues of the sea. To the fathers of men of the three faithful houses, rich reward also was given. Eonwe came among them and taught them, and they were given wisdom and power and life more enduring than any others of mortal race had possessed. A land was made for the Edain to dwell in, neither part of Middle-earth nor of Valinor, for it was sundered from either by a wide sea, yet it was nearer to Valinor. It was raised by Osse out of the depths of the great water, and it was established by Aule, and enriched by Yavanna. And the Eldar brought thither flowers and fountains out of Tol Eressëa. That land the Valar called Andor, the land of gift, and the star of Eärendil shone bright in the west, as a token that all was made ready, and as a guide over the sea. And men marveled to see that silver flame in the paths of the sun. Well,
boy, that's a nice reward,
isn't it? And it's a huge reward.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I noticed they didn't just get the land; they got wisdom and power and life more enduring.
And long life. Yep.
How'd you like to open that up for Christmas?
No kidding. Yeah. I mean, this is the pinnacle. This is the most that men could hope to attain.
Seriously.
And this is in recognition of the great deeds they did in the First Age, all that great stuff we've spent the last few episodes talking about. This is their reward. You've earned it.
Yeah, that men would sacrifice their lives when they have such a short one on Earth. I keep coming back to that.
Yeah. Yep.
My goodness. So,
incredible stuff.
Avallone, interesting. It's called that because it's the nearest to Valinor. So, do you have any word nerdery on that? Because I don't.
Oh, I've got some. Of
course you do.
I haven't quite parsed out exactly. I had a little trouble finding exactly what each root means. I mean, it tells us that it's nearest to Valinor, so that it must mean something
VAL, the VAL.
I think the
part?
VAL is definitely Valinor.
So or
Valar
is near. Yeah.
I'm guessing A is near in this case. I wonder if the Lone is somehow related to Londe, like Aqualonde, Haven.
Mm-hmm. Haven,
I'm not sure about that. I don't really have anything definitive in Quenya, but here's my favorite word nerd bit about this is, do you remember Gnome a few chapters back?
Yeah,
we talked about Tolkien sort of,
right.
NOM, yeah. And we talked about that being sort of like the real story between the idea that the Noldor were gnomes.
Right.
I think what we've got here is another case of Tolkien giving us the real story behind a real-world legend.
Oh.
I think the name
sounds a little like Avallone.
Avalon, right, exactly. The island of Avalon, which, if you know your Arthurian legend, that's where King Arthur goes to rest from his wounds after the last battle that he fights. I was thinking
if you know you're Nat King Cole.
Or Led Zeppelin.
That's true.
Or Roxy Music, I think.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's a good one. No, it's all right. Got to get a few music references in.
There you go.
But yeah, so there's this island of Avalon that King Arthur goes to, and there's this question, is he still alive there? Could he possibly return someday? And I think what Tolkien is doing with this name. He gives it a Quenya name, but he makes it very similar to the name that we know.
Just like Gnome.
Just like Gnome, yeah, and just like we'll see elsewhere in this chapter. But I think that is very intentional on Tolkien's part. He actually even compares the Undying Lands to Avalon in part of the famous Milton Waldman letter that we love to quote from.
That letter is like a book of its own.
Oh, it's incredible, yeah. Interestingly, the part that I'm thinking of isn't published in the letters, but it is conveniently published in History of Middle-earth, Volume 9.
Oh, okay.
And basically Tolkien had said to Milton Waldman, to Bilbo and Frodo, the special grace is granted to go with the elves they loved, an Arthurian ending, in which it is, of course, not made explicit whether this is an allegory of death or a mode of healing and restoration leading to a return.
Wow, so he just flat out says it's an Arthurian ending.
Very flat out says that Bilbo and Frodo's ending, going to the Undying Lands, is an Arthurian ending.
But of course, we know they don't go to just the Undying Lands. They go to Tol Eressëa, where there's a city called Avalon.
Avalon, right?
Boy,
exactly.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I just think it's, again, we talked about even the name Eärendil. He sees this name that he wants to use. He has to give it its own meaning,
of course,
and here the meaning is something like right. Yep. And here that meaning is something like near Valinor. But he leaves it open for us to interpret it as the real Avalon behind the Arthurian myth. And I think that's
awesome.
That's just really, it's just so significant because we're at this mannish point of view. And here we're, these are the stories that our ancestors.
These are our stories, right?
These are our stories. This is our prehistory.
Well, and that's good because, we're kind of getting another one. Next episode.
We're going to get another one in the second half of this story.
Real big one.
Yeah.
Man, it's another example of how well he mixes these myths together seamlessly. Really.
It really is, yeah. Yeah. And you can't you can't just say, oh, this is Avalon. It's not that simple.
No, it isn't.
This is what our ancestors were thinking of when they wrote the story of Avalon. They were actually, they were remembering this somewhere in the mists of our past.
Yeah. Oh, man. Brilliant stuff. Really is. So we get, obviously, the land as a reward. I'm just stunned. Wisdom and power and life. They didn't get just one. They get all three, and it's still not going to be enough.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah.
Men.
I know.
Andor,
Eonwë teaches them. That's actually really interesting because we always talk about how the exposure to the elves ennobled men. But here, this is...
the most powerful of the Maiar, really.
Yeah. We talked about the Maya juice. This is like the undistilled.
This is the serious stuff.
Yeah.
This guy. I mean, remember, he's the one who's more skilled at arms than any in Arda. I mean, in other words, if it came down to a one-on-one battle, he's really even up there with the Valar. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if it's just a wrestling match, I'll take Tulkas for $20. But
sure. Yeah, but skill of arms, martial,
right? Skill of arms, whole different ballgame.
Yeah,
and that is saying something.
Cool stuff.
So he comes in and teaches them. I mean, remember when men first came on the scene, Finrod came in and taught them.
Right.
This is a step up. As much as we love Finrod, this is a step up.
Oh, this is a big step up for sure.
Yeah. So they get the land. It's called Andor, or the land of gift.
Yeah.
I don't want any land.
Don't want land.
I'd rather sing.
Rather live forever.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Goodness. I love we were both right there with that.
Seriously. Oh, man. I just want to live forever. I love that. But
who wants to live forever?
Who wants to live forever? That's all I could think of. Yeah. Maybe this should. Yeah, we've got some more Queen references, I'm sure.
I'm sure.
So men see the star. I love this. So and they see it in the paths of the sun. They see it during the daylight. That's amazing. But of course, we can see Venus. Shortly after
sunrise. You can see the evening star, the morning star, in daylight. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you really can.
Yeah, it is the brightest. Mm-hmm. It's not really a star, but it's the brightest thing in the sky, except for the sun and the moon.
Right. Yeah. Good old number 3. We try harder. So, let me have
considering it's just a guy in a boat. Number 3 is pretty good. Come on,
it's just a guy in a boat.
Give my man some credit here.
Really? I mean, sure, it's a boat covered with dust that reflects the massive light of the Silmarillion.
The massive light that he wears on his forehead. Yeah,
it's just like a mobile lighthouse, really. Oh, goodness.
Oh,
all right. Let me have you take that next paragraph before we say something we really would regret.
All right. Then the Edain set sail upon the deep waters, following the star, and the Valar laid a peace upon the sea for many days, and sent sunlight and a sailing wind, so that the waters glittered before the eyes of the Edain like rippling glass, and the foam flew like snow before the stems of their ships. But so bright was Rothinzil that even at morning men could see it glimmering in the west, and in the cloudless night it shone alone, for no other star could stand beside it. Oh, there you go. It was the brightest in the sky.
Yeah.
And setting their course towards it, the Edain came at last over leagues of sea, and saw afar the land that was prepared for them, Andor, the land of gift, shimmering in a golden haze. Then they went up out of the city, and found a country fair and fruitful, and they were glad. And they called that land Elenna, which is starwards, but also Anadune, which is westerness, Númenóre in the High Eldarin tongue.
My goodness. And by the way, I just want to note that Elenna is starwards, not Star Wars. I just want to make sure, because I almost read that as, which is Star Wars. Oh, cool.
Did I say Star
No,
Wars?
no.
I almost read it
that way. I know you could.
I frequently have Star Wars on the brain.
And it's Andor, not Endor. So.
Yes, we've seen Endor.
Well, we have seen Endor, and we've talked about Endor.
Yeah. Ewoks everywhere, man. Those Ewoks all over the place.
Ewoks.
Yeah.
Now I'm just getting that music in my head.
Yeah.
That crazy party music.
And it's Anadune, not Arrakis Dune.
Not Arrakis Dune. Not Anadune. Oh goodness. So I think we didn't touch on this before, so I want to touch about it now because we're talking about the land, but that it was raised by Ase, established by Aule, and enriched by Yavanna. We come back to that teamwork thing. So I know that belongs to the last paragraph, but since we're still talking about the land,
no, that's a good point. Yeah.
It's we see that kind of thing all the time. Wherever there's more than one of them involved, it's usually a very important thing.
Yeah,
but I do love these names.
It's also interesting that he talked about it's basically the midpoint between Valinor and Middle-earth.
Yeah,
not quite the midpoint. It's a little closer to Valinor.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, again, there's that symbolic connection, that link between the myth and the real world.
Yeah, unbelievable stuff. The names
but
are beautiful.
The names,
Elenna, Andor, Anadune.
Westerness is one that he mentions a lot in Lord of the Rings.
Westerness,
I remember.
Yeah, we see that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
See that a lot, and they don't refer to it as any of these anymore.
No,
we'll find out what they refer to it as next episode.
Yeah.
And then just to give you a little context, it took a few years for all this to happen. We talked about the summons and then the raising of the land. This is now 32 years after the overthrow of Thangorodrim. So it's Second Age 32.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to kind of put that into place.
So, wow. Yeah, there was almost a generation.
Of normal men.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. Interesting. I wonder where they were living.
Yeah. Well, and how long did this journey? Well, the journey was boats. It wasn't like the journey of the elves when they were towed over on the island.
Right.
This would have been a relatively short journey, especially with that kind of weather with the sailing
beautiful
wind and the
sailing wind.
What a visual description that is!
Oh,
the rippling glass and the foam
flew like
snow.
It's beautiful,
gorgeous. You can just envision that, and
the land ahead
beautiful.
Shimmering in a golden haze. Oh.
And the bright star, even in the daylight, and the cloudless night, it's so bright that you can't even see the other stars. That's certainly brighter than Venus is now.
That's awesome. Yeah.
What a picture that is.
That's true, yeah.
So then they finally get to the land, and we're going to find out a little bit more about them and about the land itself. So I'm going to go ahead and take this next paragraph. This was the beginning of that people that in the Grey Elven speech are called the Dunedain, the Númenóreans, kings among men. But they did not thus escape from the doom of death that Ilúvatar had set upon all mankind. And they were mortal still, though their years were long, and they knew no sickness ere the shadow fell upon them. Can't have good things.
No, can't have good things at all.
That's foreboding.
Not foreboding at all.
Therefore they grew wise and glorious, and in all things more like to the firstborn than any other of the kindreds of men. And they were tall, taller than the tallest of the sons of Middle-earth. And the light of their eyes was like the bright stars. But their numbers increased only slowly in the land. For though daughters and sons were born to them, fairer than their fathers, yet their children were few. A lot of stuff to unpack here, really.
Quite a bit, yeah.
The Númenóreans and the Dunedain, right? We've heard Dunedain, even if you've never read the Silmarillion before, you've heard of the Dunedain because you've read the Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. If you've even seen the movie, the Peter Jackson movie, it's it's in there.
Yeah. Oh, he's one of the Dunedain.
Mm-hmm. Right.
87. Yeah. I'm not old.
Yeah.
There's a mashup.
I still know that whole Eowyn soup scene. Oh man, that thing. Come on. She can cook soup. I'm
Seriously,
sure she can.
Come on. Anybody can cook soup.
I can cook soup. All right.
I mean, it's one thing. I would get it if she brought a souffle over and it had fallen.
Right.
I understand that if she's trying to make baked Alaska and she can't find the...
Yeah.
Okay, I get that.
baked a cake and it's not a perfect likeness of Viggo Mortensen. Sure, okay, fine, but soup, come on.
All
Anyway.
I had was buttercream frosting. I didn't have any fondant, so what could I do?
What could I do?
The men are more. This is. One of us needs to get serious, at least, so that we can get through this. Anyway.
Why? This story's serious enough.
I know, that's true. I'm actually looking forward to getting to The Hobbit, only because it'll be nice to have some happiness and joy.
It will, yeah, that's true. It'll be nice to have something a little bit lighter. Yeah.
Yeah. This has been pretty heavy stuff the last.
It's been pretty brutal for the last
15
few
months.
Yeah.
Oh,
anyway.
Goodness. So the men are still the men are still mortal, and I love this little tidbit that we find out. I mean, obviously it's foreboding about that, ere the shadow fell upon them, but they didn't even know sickness. So even though they were mortal and could die of old age, they weren't dying of cancer or of heart disease or of influenza or anything. They didn't get sick.
Right. Yeah.
How amazing is that?
Oh, it's incredible. I mean, it's this and a few other things. I mean, it's they're
the height, the fact that they're taller than the tallest.
Right.
We all know that tall people get the best jobs, so it's no wonder they're successful. Is this where I follow my sword?
All the best jobs, Alan. Come on, I got this job co-hosting this podcast with you.
Well, we've got faces for radio. What can I say? Oh goodness, this is where I fall on my sword publicly. I mentioned last week that I thought Arnold was, or not last week, last episode that Arnold was short when we were talking about the Conan thing. He's not. He's 6'2". I was thinking of Sylvester Stallone, who's like 5'8" or 5'9". So
and I think my response was 5'8" or 5'9". Looks pretty tall to me. So that's all I'll say about that.
Oh goodness! But anyway, I just wanted to fix that because I didn't want Arnold coming after me.
Yeah.
In his Humvee. So. Well, yeah, last time I talked to him,
he could drive to you. Yeah, he could.
The last time I talked to him, he told me he'd be back.
Did he give you the thumbs up as he
there you go
into the lava?
There you go.
All right, we got to get back on track.
So, I did notice though that mortality had been mentioned again. They're mortal. They didn't escape the doom of death. It's almost like Tolkien's trying to tell us something.
Almost, yeah.
Almost.
Yeah, it's true. He keeps dropping this word mortal in there.
Yeah, and he does know what it means. The children are interesting. Go ahead. I'm so sorry.
Well, yeah. Well, you were starting to talk about these. The no sickness, the tallness, eyes
light
like
of their
bright
eyes.
stars.
That made me think of like the way everybody else would see the Noldor. When they were in exile in Middle Earth, it's like, whoa, you're something special.
Right. Exactly.
That gift is being given to these guys.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think you were about to talk about the children, the few children. Remember, elves don't have many children.
That's exactly right.
Feanor and Ne'er-do-Nell accepted.
Well, yeah.
But
7 kids, man.
I know. Wow. Yeah, can't imagine. But it occurs to me that all of these are elf-like characteristics, aren't they?
Exactly. That's where I was headed with that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, men can't be given immortality, but
no. But they can be given a lot of other things.
Or Ilúvatar is doing as much as possible to make them as elf-like as possible.
It sure seems that way.
They're rewarding them not only with land and wisdom, but with just
stature and the light in their eyes and the so much
something in their bodies.
Yeah, there really is a genetic element to this. And
that's
why
a good way of putting it.
It's something that's really hard coded in their DNA now. That comes through the Elven blood, but also the Maiar blood that's in their strain. So, but go ahead. I'm so sorry.
It's a big reward. I mean, it's a really significant reward.
It is, and in fact, it's a reward that ends up backfiring, as we'll see, because like we talked about earlier, it's just not enough. Tolkien mentioned this directly in the famous letter 131 that we keep citing, the letter to Milton Waldman. We should just put that on our walls or something because we reference it so often.
We probably should.
He says that reward on earth is more dangerous for men than punishment. And in reference to the Númenóreans specifically, he says that their reward is their undoing or the means of their temptation. And how true is that? I mean, it seems like the more you get, the less satisfied you are, and the more you want. Yeah.
Yeah. They just can't get enough.
Exactly. So we end up with a doop 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 doop. So we get a little geography. We'll just skim some of these next sections. We get a description of the land itself, the Meneltarma in the middle, the Pillar of Heaven. And in this text, it's described that there's this high place that was hallowed to Eru Ilúvatar, open and unroofed, and there was no other temple or fane, which is like a shrine, in the land. That's really interesting, and I want to touch on that. We talk sometimes about religion, and we haven't really talked about religion in depth since Eindalindale. Scratch that. At least since the festival that Manwë arranged, that when he invited Fëanor, that ended so well.
Right.
So I wanted to do a quick sidebar.
Right. Well, because we haven't seen. I mean, there really isn't much of it in the Quenta, is there? We're almost taking us back to that thing about reverence versus worship.
Exactly, and that's kind of the point. I don't think there's not supposed to be that. This is all kind of a pre-religious society, and we're starting to see a little of that evolve here. But it's an interesting subject, and I think people often ask questions about it, sometimes because they like seeing connections with Tolkien's worldview, or sometimes because they really don't like religion in the book, and so they want to find out how they can kill it. But, it's here, so let's just address it. I'm going to start with a quote from letter 153. We've quoted from this before when it comes to either religious issues or death, specifically. I think we probably referenced it in episode 10. It's the letter that he wrote to that manager of a Catholic bookstore.
Okay, right, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it includes a lot on the topic, but here's the quote from that letter that addresses this. First he says, "The Númenóreans and others of that branch of humanity that fought against Morgoth, even if they elected to remain in Middle-earth and didn't go to Númenor, such as the Rohirrim, were pure monotheists. But there was no temple in Númenor until Sauron introduced the cult of Morgoth." Well, there's our spoiler. "The top of the mountain, the Menel Tarma or Pillar of Heaven, was dedicated to Eru, the One, and there at any time privately, and at certain times publicly, God was invoked, praised, and adored, an imitation of the Valar and the mountain of Aman." Now that last little bit's interesting too. That means that there's some sort of worship going on in Valinor. We just aren't ever really seeing it.
Right.
Right, because it's an imitation of what the Valar do in the mountain of Aman.
Right.
But we get something else interesting, that the good men, not just the Númenóreans, but any of them that fought against Morgoth, so the Rohirrim, they were all pure monotheists, but just no structure of worship. There's a place of worship.
There's no church, there's no temple.
Exactly. There's no temple, there's no shrine, there's no church. There's really, here at least, there's nothing to describe a worship ceremony or anything like that. There's just a place of worship, the top of the mountain. But just as our
and you said at any time privately and at certain times publicly, so it's as much like a personal shrine,
except not a shrine. There's no structure.
Right, I know, right, exactly, like a personal
retreat.
place of reflection or something.
A place of reflection is a good way to
as much as it is a place for organized ceremony.
Exactly, and yet we do get some organized ceremony, and that's where we went into Unfinished Tales a couple episodes for Tuor to really help us get a grasp on that chapter in the Silmarillion. I'm going to do the same thing here. In Part 2 of Unfinished Tales, Section 1, a description of the island of Númenor, we get this following description of the top of the Menel Tarma and the things that took place there.
Okay. I think I remember this.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, so take a listen. "For the summit was somewhat flattened and depressed, and could contain a great multitude, but it remained untouched by hands throughout the history of Númenor. No building, no raised altar, not even a pile of undressed stones ever stood there, and no other likeness of a temple did the Númenóreans possess in all the days of their grace, until the coming of Sauron. There no tool or weapon had ever been born, and there none might speak any word save the king only. Thrice only in each year the king spoke, offering prayer for the coming year at the Eru Kierme, in the first days of spring, praise of Eru Ilúvatar at the Eru Laitale. That's a hard word to say. I'm going to say it again.
That's a tough one. Kudos to you for
Eru Laitale in midsummer, and thanksgiving to him at the Eru Hantale at the end of autumn. Before we go on, you've got
those are cool. No, those are just cool words. And I mean, you can almost Laitale, Eru Laitale.
Yeah,
is the praise,
that's the
right?
One, isn't it? Yep.
Yeah, because there's that alaitate at the end of Return of the King. Praise them with great praise.
Exactly.
So yeah, that's one of those I always love when you can see that Quenya root and you can see
isn't
what it
that
means.
Awesome?
And yeah, I mean you got Eru at the beginning of each one of these.
Yeah, so each one of these. So that's praise Eru, and we've got Eru Hantale, which is thanks to Eru, and
I'm sure
Erukirme,
that Hanta root must be in something else.
It
I can't
must
think of
be.
anything.
I couldn't find anything on that one or the first one, which is Erukirme, which is a
Kierme.
prayer to Eru.
Yeah.
But that's not surprising since prayer is something that is really never mentioned. So
Right.
it's not surprising we don't find that word. But
yeah.
but
Very cool words though. Yeah.
They really are. And then he describes the actual ceremony itself. He says that that at these times the king ascended the mountain on foot, followed by a great concourse of the people, clad in white and garlanded, but silent. At other times the people were free to climb to the summit alone or in company, but it is said that the silence was so great that even a stranger ignorant of Númenor and all its history, if he were transported thither, would not have dared to speak aloud. No bird ever came there, save only eagles. If anyone approached the summit, at once 3 eagles would appear and alight upon 3 rocks near to the western edge. But at the times of the 3 prayers, they did not descend, remaining in the sky and hovering above the people. They were called the Witnesses of Manwë, and they were believed to be sent by him from Aman to keep watch upon the holy mountain and upon all the land. So there's a pretty lengthy description of the religious ceremony, how it's done, when it's done, 3 times a year, so first days of spring, midsummer, and at the end of autumn. Really cool, and I love the eagles. I mean, how cool is it that Manwë sends the eagles to observe all of this? I mean,
the Witnesses of Manwë. That's really cool.
Yeah, capitalized. The Witnesses of Manwë. Yeah. There's a band name for you. The Witnesses of Manwë will be opening tonight.
I saw Witnesses of Manwë. Man, they're amazing.
They did that 3 prayers. What a cool song that is.
Oh, it's such a great song. Yeah, it's like 45 minutes of just music, no words.
Total prog rock, man.
Yeah, totally. It's really beautiful. I mean, it's something. What I love about it is, you talk about it being the first stage, I think you were saying, was a pre-religious world, and this is a world that's sort of gaining religion, but this is still religion at its simplest, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's
there's something very pure, very kind of back to basics, really.
Yeah, I would say, and it's sort of embracing nature, embracing the greatness of this creation.
Yeah, the top of the mountain is the cathedral. This is it's a place of beauty, and it's a place of reflection, and it's a
tranquility. The tranquility here is incredible, and I think true to Tolkien's aim, this is something that a person who is not the least bit religious could appreciate because it's just tranquil. It's the kind of place that it's like, I've never climbed a mountain, but it's the kind of place you can imagine climbing to the top of and just looking around and thinking, wow, the world is an amazing place,
It is. And when you get to the top of some, I'm not a mountain climber. You've seen me. I mean, I'm not
me either, man. I've never done it.
I remember one time when we went to Rocky Mountain National Park, we did climb a little hill that's overlooking the Continental Divide, and it's something at like 14,000 feet or something ridiculously high.
Okay.
We were silent because he couldn't catch a breath. It was totally.
That's the real reason nobody spoke at the top of the mountain.
Exactly. Like, we just walked up here. I can't say anything. But you're looking down on these mountains that are all 12,000 feet high. You're looking across the Rockies, and that is the feeling you get. There's something absolutely and deeply awe-inspiring. Yeah. Again, like you said, whether you come from a Christian worldview like Tolkien. And think of it in the context of, wow, this is, what an amazing creation.
The greatness of God's creation.
Or if you just come to it from of Earth, of just, what an awe-inspiring view it is.
Right.
But I think you're right. That's another example of Tolkien being able to take his worldview and inject
create
it in
something
such a
that
way
reaches across.
Exactly. That
others,
crosses that divide. And, that makes sense because he'd said all along, and we go all the way back to, I think, our first episode for this, that his whole problem with the Arthurian legends being the legends for England was that it had explicit ties to Christianity.
Right.
And he's talking about something that needs to have taken place long before that. Mm-hmm. So he knows that in creating a myth that covers this back time, it can't be explicitly, tied into the Christian religion or to any existing religion.
Right.
But I love that. Beautiful stuff. So thank
really
you
cool.
for letting
Glad
me
you
engage
found
in that sidebar. That Unfinished Tales portion was really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So
that's great. Thank you.
No problem. So we get a little bit more of the geography of the island. We get the tombs of the kings. We get the fact that
they're right at the foot of the mountain.
Exactly.
And so
everything's
the
all in the
kings,
middle. Everything's on the middle of this island, right?
Yeah.
It's shaped like a starfish, kind of.
And yeah, look at the map. I mean, it is shaped like a star. These 5 peninsulas radiating out from the middle, and it would make geographical and I imagine strategic sense. Not that they have any enemies that are coming after them, but to put the capital right there at the middle, the capital of Armenelos.
Yep. And there's the citadel of Elros is there. Interesting. The text says, let's see, where is it here? Whom the Valar appointed to be the first king of the Dunedain. Now
that's some authority right there. Yeah.
Exactly. This isn't Elros coming along saying, I name this unto myself, and I name this unto myself. This is the Valar saying, yo, here's your king right here. This guy.
Yeah, right. Right, exactly. This is like, so many of the medieval kings that claim to rule by the right of God, but this is, a god actually picked you and said, yeah, you can do it.
Yeah, you.
And people were present. There were witnesses to it.
Yeah, exactly. Not like, well, that's a very good point. I hadn't thought about it that way, but so we get a brief mention of the gift of death again, but it's put in the context of telling us that Elrond and Elros get to choose what they wanted. We find out that Elros lived 500 years, and that he ruled the Númenóreans for 410 of those years.
Wow!
So that brings us back to the timeline, which tells us then that it was Second Age 442 when he died.
Wow, so, that's incredible.
That is really incredible. 410 years as king.
Yeah.
Are we ever going to have an election?
Why is he still king?
You don't vote
I didn't
for a
vote
king.
For him.
You don't vote for a king.
Don't vote
How do you
for
become king then? The
Manwë, king of the Valar, dressed in shimmering blue.
Yeah, gave me a sword. Watery kings throwing swords doesn't sound like a basis.
Airy kings sitting on mountains distributing swords.
Wearing blue. Same outfit every day. No basis for a system of government.
Should I wear blue? Should I wear blue?
Should I wear blue or blue?
I'll wear blue today.
Hey, Varda, what do you think? Blue?
Oh, Sulimo.
Oh, my goodness. All right. Let me have you take the next little passage. We're gonna talk here about the glory days of Númenor. So there's our Bruce Springsteen reference.
Yeah. Nice. Very well done. Yeah. So we're talking about the first sentence I won't read, but basically Middle Earth is continuing
Dark
to
Ages.
progress.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, and the Dunedain and Númenor are continuing to increase in stature. For though this people used still their own speech, their kings and lords knew and spoke also the Elven tongue, which they had learned in the days of their alliance. And thus they held converse still with the Eldar, whether of Eressia or of the westlands of Middle Earth. And the lore masters among them learned also the high Eldarin tongue of the Blessed Realm, in which much story and song was preserved from the beginning of the world. And they made letters and scrolls and books, and wrote in them many things of wisdom and wonder in the high tide of their realm, of which all is now forgot. So it came to pass that, beside their own names, all the lords of the Númenóreans had also Eldarin names, and the like with the cities and fair places that they founded in Númenor and on the shores of the hither lands.
My goodness.
So
that's why I had you read that, because it mentioned languages. I thought, well, hey, I'm going to have my word nerd friend here tell us.
Yeah, you know me well.
I do.
3 languages. I mean, so the common man, so to speak, is speaking Adonaic.
Right.
And then the kings and the rulers, the lords, all speak Sindarin. And then the lore masters also know Quenya.
Yeah.
And
pretty
that's
amazing.
and Quenya. Now we're seeing Quenya really. We saw this some in the first age, but now we're really seeing how Quenya sort of steps into this role as sort of the language of lore,
exactly,
and history, and Sindarin is still a language of sort of the ennobled people, the ennobled people. So yeah, I mean, remember we've talked about how language is culture. Language is sort of a telegraph for culture,
right?
So Elvish language is sort of a sign of elvishness. Then that tells us that the kings and lords are a little bit more elvish than the common man of Numenor. And I
Right.
think that just reminds me of one of my favorite themes, which is the theme of ennoblement that we talk about throughout.
Love that. Love that theme.
Yeah. Yeah. And this idea that, those with that elvish strain and, the Maya strain also, but are
Yeah.
the ones that are most fit to rule.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's just a subtle reminder of the little difference in sort of stature between the lords of Numenor and the most of the Númenóreans.
Yeah. Well, they better make sure that Thingol's okay with them speaking Quenya. Oh, wait.
Oh yeah,
He's okay with it.
his dwarf stabbed body is at the bottom of the Great Sea now. So
Stop talking like that. I hear you. This used to be in Balerion. Okay. I kid. Oh, man.
man.
So,
You'd have to shout pretty loud to get
Yeah.
his voice over those waves.
I hear you. Oh,
Actually,
man.
no. By now, he might actually be in the halls of Mandos. Maybe
Yeah.
he's shouting at them from the west.
Yeah, there you go. I can hear you from here.
Yeah,
But anyway,
calling them up by Palantir.
seriously.
I heard you guys.
My goodness. So I love this bit about story and song preserved from the beginning of the world.
Mm-hmm.
That tells us, again, this is part of that, the backstory to the story itself, right? How did we get this? How did we get the Silmarillion? Well, because some of this was preserved from the beginning of the world. Now, that stuff somehow made it around, but all the things of wisdom and wonder from the high tide of their realm is now forgot.
Yeah.
But
You can imagine some of those things that are mentioned in the Quenta, like the Nol Delante and things like that are
Yeah.
lost. Would have been
in there.
lost. It's almost like the library at Alexandria or something.
That's exactly what I was
ancient wisdom
thinking.
That's lost.
That's interesting because we've talked off air, and we're going to talk again later about how, in some ways, the Númenóreans really are inspired by the Egyptian culture. So the fact that you
that's
talk
true.
about the Library of Alexandria is sort of ironic, but
Interesting.
yeah, we'll get to that later. They're not. It's not like they are Egypt. I mean, like we
No,
talked about,
no,
you
of
can't
course.
look at the bones and look at a one-to-one relationship, but you'll see later the way they do their tombs that it starts to seem a little Egyptian.
A little bit Egyptian. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and we'll talk about. I mean, there's lots of things in there. We talked about the Roman Empire and things like that. And I'll even mention some of that later.
Yeah,
so.
I was going to say. I think and I know which section you're going to probably mention that because I'm thinking about the same thing. So mighty in craft, we see in the next paragraph, they've got this potential to dominate. They could have done anything they wanted, but they were men of peace, and they end up becoming mariners whose like will never be seen again. So, but where can they sail? So now we're going to get to the thorn in the side of men. And I'll take the next little bit here.
There's one thing wrong.
That's right. There's
one
only
little
one thing.
Yeah.
Don't eat from this tree. Wait, no, it's not that. But boy, isn't it? I mean, this is really that same thing.
Boy,
It's
you're
like,
right. It totally is. Yeah.
you can do anything else.
You're
but
living
you
in a
can't do
paradise.
this.
You can do anything you want except this one thing.
Exactly. You can do anything you want except one thing. But of course, what's the one thing they're going to want to do? The thing they're not supposed to do. But the lords of Valinor forbade them to sail so far westward that the coasts of Númenor could no longer be seen. And for long the Dunedain were content, though they did not fully understand the purpose of this ban. But the design of Manwë was that the Númenóreans should not be tempted to seek for the Blessed Realm, nor desire to overpass the limits set to their bliss, becoming enamored of the immortality of the Valar and the Eldar, and the lands where all things endure. For in those days Valinor still remained in the world visible, and there Ilúvatar permitted the Valar to maintain upon earth an abiding place, a memorial of that which might have been if Morgoth had not cast his shadow on the world. Oh, boy.
Wow.
So the ban.
Yeah, so they're forbidden to sail. Let's break this down. So they're forbidden to sail beyond. They're forbidden to sail west beyond sight of the west coast of Númenor.
Right, which is really not. Actually,
Really wouldn't.
that actually
Well,
might be kind of far because it's still a flat world.
The Earth is flat, right?
I mean,
That's interesting. Yeah.
yeah. How far would that be? I don't know.
I mean, we know they can see all the way to
haze.
They can see all the way to Avalane from the top of the Menel Tarma.
From the
right?
top of
So
the Menel Tarma, right?
That's
right.
going to give them quite a bit of visibility. It wouldn't be But it is. I think you're right. I think it would be kind of far because Earth is
It'd be
flat.
farther than you and I would think of today.
Right.
Because obviously
Yeah.
with the curvature of the Earth,
Yeah.
you're going to get to the point where you can't see the lands pretty darn quick.
Right.
I mean, if I can't sail past, where I can see the land here in California, I'm not going to make it very far out into the
Right.
ocean.
Yeah. You're
Not making
Right.
it to Hawaii, that's for sure.
right. Exactly.
So that's an interesting thing. But yeah, clearly they're not supposed to get any further. And the idea being that the closer they get, the more tempted they would be.
The more
perhaps.
tempted they'll be. Yeah.
Right. And I love this, not to overpass the limits set to their bliss. There are limits.
Oh yeah.
And we'll get
Yeah.
to some of that. We really are going to spend some time talking about that a little bit later. So I don't want to
Yeah.
dig in too deep now, but that's a really interesting thing to think about, that there really are limits that are based on your nature as a man.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's the heart of this story, isn't
It
it?
really is. It really is. I mean, who was it that asked our question that ended up leading to episode 10? It was one of our regular listeners, Allison.
It was Allison. That's right.
And, I'm thinking we could have just told her, we'll just wait. We would have
That's
told her to
true.
wait for 15
so much.
months.
Yeah, it is so
But
well
this
answered
episode
by
is
this. Yeah.
really this really does touch a lot on what we spent a lot of time on in episode 10 on the gift of death. So we're gonna
Yeah.
get back to that. But for now, we just wanted to kind of define the ban, maybe talk about what it required of the Númenóreans. You had a theory, maybe this was a misstep.
Well, yeah, only because they clearly don't understand the ban.
Right.
And these are grown men. Part of me wants to say, well, why didn't Manwë just explain it to them?
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like this could be a bit of a misstep on Manwë's part. We see the Valar make mistakes.
Oh yeah.
And maybe just a ban might have been fine if you explain it, just a little explanation on the front end. I'm not sure the story would have ended up any differently.
No.
But it is one of those what if questions that makes me feel like, well, did the Valar underestimate men, and in so doing, did they
underestimate
kind of make things worse?
the nature of temptation? I mean, in other
or
words,
underestimate? Yeah.
Maybe it's you can't sail west at all, or I mean something.
Right.
But yeah, I understand about the explanation. I remember seeing some discussions in forums and online groups about that before, and like, well, it's not fair that they didn't tell them why, blah blah. Well, the thing is, eventually they do give them an explanation, and you can see it doesn't satisfy them at all.
That is true.
Now
Granted,
that
the
answer
seed
comes later.
The bad seed had kind of grown.
That's the
by
thing.
that point.
You do still have that what if, because if they understood from the beginning, maybe that would have at least. I don't know that it would have changed the ending. It might have delayed.
I don't think so. It might have delayed it. They might have lasted a few more.
Yeah, a couple more
1,000
generations.
years.
Yeah.
A few more 100 years, probably not a few more 1,000 years.
Yeah,
but
a few more
like
100 years would be just a few
It would be
kings.
interesting to know what a king as wise as Elros might, somebody who was really good and really pure might have done, with that knowledge, how he might have instructed.
Yeah, how they could have made it part of their instruction that they passed down from generation to generation.
Yeah. I don't know. It's a what if. It doesn't matter because
you're right. What if? Well, Tolkien wrote it this way.
Right. We have to accept the story for what it is. But it is interesting. I do think it's worth noting just the possibility that this is a possible misstep from the Valar.
Yeah, we've seen it before.
You mentioned, it's not fair. They should have told them. The fact that it's not fair doesn't change the fact that it was still wrong for men to do what they did.
That's correct. That's correct.
That's kind of what this boils down to.
Anybody who's a parent knows that the answer, because I told you so, is entirely valid.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And sure, if you have the opportunity to explain yourself to your 5-year-old, you go right ahead. But you shouldn't have to do so in order to get them to obey.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, that's really what I'm thinking here. I'm picturing my 5-year-old who's constantly, I've trained him now. He now knows that he needs to obey first, and then he can ask, why did I have him do that?
Yeah.
But, he's 5, so he doesn't always remember that. But yeah, it really is. It does kind of feel that way. Like, okay.
And it works for grown men too. I'm
clearly.
Right. I'm thinking of Sheridan and Kosh now for Babylon 5. There's like a whole. They have a whole. I don't have the art, and they had like a whole argument, but
I do remember that. I can't
Kosh not explaining enough. I'll have to find it.
Well, if you can't find it, Tom Hillman will, I'm sure, tell us all about it.
He'll be right there with it for us.
Yes, he will. Certainly the ban asked for great trust from the Númenóreans, right?
Yeah.
I mean, at the start, this seems reasonable. I mean, they just gave him this land. They just gave him all this rich reward. So that sort of trust you'd expect to see, but maybe not later. And that's the problem is, could they have established this trust in a way that it became culturally transmitted, from generation to generation?
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, again, like give the rationale so that people can teach the rationale.
Exactly.
Like, just bake it into their philosophy.
Teach the why. Teach the why.
Teach the why. Very good.
Okay, so let me have you. We're going to move along. I'm looking at our clock, going, "Are you kidding me? We're only not even halfway through our outline, and we're an hour and 15 into
We're
this."
close to halfway.
So I want to have you read the next paragraph, starting there with "But the wise."
Okay. But the wise among them knew that this distant land was not indeed the blessed realm of Valinor, but was Avallone, the haven of the Eldar upon Eresia, easternmost of the Undying Lands. And thence at times the firstborn still would come sailing to Númenor in oarless boats, as white birds flying from the sunset. And they brought to Númenor many gifts, birds of song, and fragrant flowers, and herbs of great virtue. And a seedling they brought of Celeborn, the white tree that grew in the midst of Eresia, and that was, in its turn, a seedling of Galathylion, the tree of Tuna, the image of Telperion that Yavanna gave to the Eldar in the Blessed Realm. And the tree grew and blossomed in the courts of the king in Armenelos. Nimloth it was named, and flowered in the evening, and the shadows of night it filled with its fragrance.
What a beautiful, beautiful paragraph.
Yeah, it's a
I
cool
love
one.
that. The birds of song, which we actually see quite a bit of in the tale of Arendis and what's his name again?
Aldarion.
Aldarion. I couldn't remember his name for a moment.
Yeah.
We see that, but yeah, the flowers and the herbs and of course the white tree, and
Yeah.
I love that. The shadows of night it filled with its fragrance. What a beautiful picture.
So cool. I love these gifts.
They're wonderful gifts.
Just especially the tree. Just it's this reminder, that even though the Númenóreans can't be elevated, the elves are bringing immortal things down to them from the west, and kind of a hey, don't come to us, but we'll come to you. Well, we deliver. We deliver
immortality.
We deliver the magic. I think that's really cool.
It is. It really is. And, you guys know the history of this tree. I mean, our listeners, whether they know it or not, if they've read The Lord of the Rings, they know what eventually comes from Nimloth. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk more about that at the end of Akallabêth.
Yep.
Just stunning, beautiful stuff. It is interesting, though, that the tree was named after the first king's maternal grandmother, I think.
Yeah.
Maternal.
That does strike me as a little odd. Yeah, his Elwing's. Yeah, it's Elwing's mother. Yeah.
Hi, Grandma. You smell nice tonight.
That's a little weird.
Odd.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Interesting, but still.
Well, I mean, hey, the tree that it came from was named after.
That's true.
Celeborn.
That's true.
So, Nimloth's uncle, I think we determined.
Yeah. Anyway, really cool stuff. I'm going to skip the next chapter, skip the next paragraph a little, or most of it. But I do want to touch on one line before I grab the passage I want to read. And that's that these men that were, mariners, they sailed all over Middle Earth. They actually got to the point where they were seeing the gates of morning in the east. Because remember, this is still a flat Earth. So they'd gone all the way around the continent. All the way around.
Basically to the edge of the Earth, the eastern edge of the Earth.
To the eastern edge of the Earth. And here they are, almost to the west of the Earth.
Yeah.
And they can't go any further west than they can go.
Further west.
So they've explored everything. Certainly they've gone as far as they can to the west, and now they've gone all the way to the east. You can't go any further east without falling off, I guess.
That's so cool. I mean, these guys were mariners, just the best that have ever been seen.
Boy, you're not kidding. Talk about being gone for a long time.
Yep.
So, but, needless to say, this brings them into contact with men of Middle-earth, and so that's where I'm going to go ahead and pick up. And coming among them, the Númenóreans taught them many things. Corn and wine they brought, and they instructed men in the sowing of seed and the grinding of grain, in the hewing of wood and the shaping of stone, and in the ordering of their life, such as it might be in the lands of swift death and little bliss. Then the men of Middle-earth were comforted, and here and there upon the western shores the houseless woods drew back, and men shook off the yoke of the offspring of Morgoth, and unlearned their terror of the dark. And they revered the memory of the tall sea kings, and when they had departed, they called them gods, hoping for their return. For at that time the Númenóreans dwelt never long in Middle-earth, nor made there as yet any habitation of their own. Eastward they must sail, but ever west their hearts returned. Love that last line, too. Boy, isn't that telling?
Yeah, ever west their hearts returned. That was home.
That was.
And that was and the furthest west was really where
that's where
what they
really
yearned
wanted
for.
to go.
It's almost, there's a good thing there. You know, they long to go home, but there's also that little sinister seed of that they still really want to go west.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
But
I love. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was about to say, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say I love the interaction with the men of Middle-earth. You know, we talked a moment ago about how the bad guys, you know, the ones who had followed Morgoth, went back to, you know, among the lesser men, and they, you know, lorded it over them as tyrants. And here, you know, these sea kings from Númenor are coming over and bringing technology and culture, corn and wine and agriculture and the grinding of grain. You know, it's I love that, the ordering of their life, such as it might be in the lands of their life. I love that. Little bliss.
What is that? What is the ordering of their life? They teach them how to balance a checkbook? I mean, what? How to prioritize?
You know,
they taught them list management, like
probably not far off. I mean, I think it is a little bit about, you know, it's a little bit about, you know, life is tough. Here's some knowledge that can make it better, you know, to do the most you can with what you've got. And what I love about this, and I talked to you a little bit about this, you know, before we started recording, but what's fascinating about this to me is, quick history lesson. I know we talk about the Anglo-Saxons and Tolkien's love of the Anglo-Saxons. If anybody is not really clear who they were they were invaders from Germany who settled Great Britain after the Romans moved out. Basically, after the Roman Empire fell in the west, the Romans receded from Britain, and you know, these Germanic invaders came to Britain. They were the ancestors of the English. Right. But they were very much like these men of Middle-earth in that they were sort of less advanced civilization that had taken over a place where, you know, maybe more advanced people had once walked. You know, it's Anglo-Saxon poetry has this phrase, enta yearn, the work of giants. They talk about sometimes the orthunk enta yearn or the eld enta yearn. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
I hope you are too, but I think you are.
It's this idea that there were all these Roman ruins all over the island of Great Britain, and the Anglo-Saxons, not really knowing where they came from or who could possibly build these things, they called them the work of giants. That was sort of the only explanation they could come up with. And I bring that up just because it's a phrase that Tolkien was inspired by. Just the name Ents comes from it. I'll just put that out there.
That's
we'll talk
exactly
about that
what I wanted to mention.
Yeah, we'll talk about that another time. Actually, Orthunk comes from that too. Orthanc, Saruman's tower. But anyway, I mean, for purposes of this discussion, I think that's a little bit like what we have here. We have this less advanced civilization that is, you know, occupying lands, or occupying the place, I guess, because Beleriand has sunk. But, you know, they're
true
taking their place in Middle-earth society, in sort of on top of the pyramid of Middle-earth society, where more civilized people once walked, you know.
I see.
Except, unlike with the Anglo-Saxons, here, the Númenóreans actually come back and teach them. As opposed to, you know, the Dark Age that, you know, the age of relative uncivilization the Anglo-Saxons lived in. I can't help feeling like this is a little bit like if the Romans had come back and taught the Anglo-Saxons.
My goodness.
You know, imagine if the Romans had come, if there were Romans
if there were Romans left, right?
I guess there were Eastern Romans, but if they had come back and taught the Anglo-Saxons, it kind of feels to me like Tolkien is imagining what might happen in a world where, you know, these giants, these Enta, who did this great work, if they came back to teach the newcomers and to try and elevate them out of their darkness. And I just can't help wondering if this is, you know, Tolkien the medievalist kind of playing around with a little what if of history.
Little alternate history, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's fascinating.
and that's oversimplifying it, I guess, because
Well,
again,
sure.
this is prehistory, but it's just, yeah, imagine what would happen if, if a culture like this,
Exactly. If that advanced
experience,
civilization that was
yeah,
gone
yeah,
was able to come back and was not here to conquer but to teach.
right.
My goodness.
It's
Which, of
almost
course,
like
the
that.
Roman culture would not have done. They would have come in and
This
they wouldn't have taught
this
the
is
Anglo-Saxons. They would have killed them all.
this is quite true. This is quite true.
Oh, man.
It's almost like that Ancient Aliens show.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens.
Oh, my
I'm not saying
goodness.
it's Númenóreans, but it's Númenóreans. Sorry.
Oh, goodness.
Anyway.
Yeah, let's see. So men of Middle-earth unlearn their fear of the dark. I thought that was pretty cool.
Well,
You
yeah,
mentioned
again,
something.
wisdom, the wisdom that the Númenor, they don't just bring technology and agriculture. They
No.
bring, they bring knowledge of the way they bring wisdom.
Yeah.
Wisdom again, kind of flowing east. It came east from Avalon to Númenor, and now it's coming east from Númenor to
Well,
Middle Earth.
even from Valinor to Avalon, and then
That's
Avalon
true,
to
yeah.
Númenor, and Númenor to Middle Earth. It's trickle down wisdom. Bueller.
Yeah, I'm not. That's awful.
Something DOO wisdom. Sorry, there was a Ferris Bueller Day Off reference. We just don't get those very often.
No, not nearly enough.
Oh, man.
Voodoo economics.
Oh,
Wow,
man.
that took me a second.
I'm
The
sure it
Bueller
did.
part I got, but yeah,
But the something DOO economics.
yeah, something DOO
That guy's hilarious, by the way.
do. He used to have a show.
Yeah,
Ben Stein.
yeah.
He used to have a game show.
Yeah. I've seen him on. He's still around. Like I think on Facebook and stuff. He's haven't seen him much lately, but yeah, funny guy. But the wisdom doesn't stick, does it? I mean, the men of Middle Earth call them gods when they leave.
Yeah, they seem to misinterpret everything that they're being taught. But I mean, at least it's their mistake. It's not the Númenóreans claiming to be gods.
That's true, and that's important. I mean,
Yeah.
at least not yet.
Yeah, at least not yet. Yeah.
Let's put this in the timeline. The first ships came back to Middle Earth during Tar Elendil's reign. So that's between Second Age 590 and 740. So we're talking about 180 years after the death of Elros. So we're into still the early history. But I mentioned that because we're going to bring in the timeline a lot more in a little bit when we talk about the message that the Valar bring, or that is brought from the Valar, and when we talk about Sauron, which we'll get to.
Okay.
So, but now we get to hear about the yearning. So I'm going to have you take the next reading here.
Yeah. So this is picking up right where you left off, talking about this yearning for the West.
Mm-hmm.
Now this yearning grew ever greater with the years, and the Númenóreans began to hunger for the undying city that they saw from afar, and the desire of everlasting life, to escape from death and the ending of delight, grew strong upon them, and ever as their power and glory grew greater, their unquiet increased.
Yeah.
For though the Valar had rewarded the Dúnedain with long life, they could not take from them the weariness of the world that comes at last, and they died, even their kings of the seed of Eärendil, and the span of their lives was brief in the eyes of the Eldar. Thus it was that a shadow fell upon them, in which maybe the will of Morgoth was at work that still moved in the world.
My goodness. Now, I should be clear, time really does move quite a bit here between the last paragraph and this one, because we actually read in the timeline that the shadow didn't fall on them until during Tar Ministir's reign, which is Second Age 1800. So it did take a long time for the shadow to fall. But
we're
going
to be jumping. We're going to jump ahead about 1,000 years.
Quite a bit. Quite a bit. I want to bring in something from one of the letters again. Letter 131 again. Talking about...
Tack it to the wall.
Exactly. Talking about the Númenóreans, Tolkien says that their long life aids their achievements in art and wisdom, but breeds a possessive attitude to these things, and desire awakens for more time for their enjoyment. And we know what Tolkien has thought about possessiveness before. I mean, in that same letter, he talks about how the fall of the elves is due to one thing, the possessiveness of Fëanor and his sons for the Silmarils.
Right.
So, possessiveness is not a good thing. And here we go, now men are showing it. But it's interesting. The Valar couldn't even, it's not just that they couldn't take away the gift of death. They couldn't even take away the weariness of the world. Mm-hmm. That's part of the gift, apparently. That's part and parcel
of their
death.
nature. Yeah,
exactly. So they are going to die, and they don't want to accept that. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that it's the better they get, the more power and glory, their unquiet increases.
The more they get, the more unsatisfied they are.
Isn't that ridiculous?
The more they get, the more they want. It really is.
Total lack of contentedness.
I hate to cast the first stone here because who knows how I would be in this situation. But I mean, you with the distance of reading this in a book, it's like, what are you thinking? You have everything, and the more you get, the more you want. Yeah,
you have wisdom. You have You're 6'5", man. Yeah,
you're like way taller than Sean. Yeah,
seriously.
Exactly. Man, I know it's crazy. It's
yeah, it is, and I think it's a reflection on what a fallen world does to men. I mean, we live in a fallen world, and that's going to lead to these imperfect desires, and
right. Well, the will of Morgoth still moves in the world.
Absolutely.
It is still the marred world or the marred Arda.
That's the thing. Is it's not just that Morgoth left his will behind. It's that part of Morgoth really is still Morgoth's gone, but he marred Arda. Mm-hmm. And I don't have this letter. I didn't put it into my notes because I wasn't going to bring it up. But that really does tie in something that Tolkien once said to somebody. He was talking about the difference between the fall in the Christian story and the fall in his story. And he says that in the Christian story, the world was made perfect, and that the fall came really as a consequence of this first fall, talking about the fall of Lucifer, of Satan, mm-hmm. and that he then initiated the second fall. But that didn't have anything to do with creation, that creation was perfect initially. Well, in his myth, Tolkien says the difference here is that the world is already made flawed because Melkor was part of the music, and Melkor's discord became part of the very nature, the very matter of Arda.
Right.
So even with Morgoth gone and stuffed out into the void, we're in a world that's more than just a fallen world. We're in a world that's already that has corruption built into it.
That's already right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's another take that remaking of Arda before that'll go away.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's in Morgoth's Ring where he talks about the idea that all the matter of Arda has a Melkor ingredient in it.
Yeah.
And I think it's also in Morgoth's Ring. I think it's in the Myths Transformed section in Morgoth's Ring, where he talks about, he goes on, he has an essay that goes on about the idea that the discord is what created all this corruption. The discord at the very beginning. So you're right. It was there from the beginning.
Yeah, which was the argument that some of the Valar made when they were talking about the statute of Finwë and Miriel. Like, this is not really Miriel's fault. Miriel, she's part of this fallen earth too. Right. So interesting. So then they start to murmur. Mm-hmm. Now they're reminding me not of the Egyptians but of the Israelites who murmured all the time against God. You gotta lead us out of the desert just to kill us. Blah blah blah.
There you go. It's how he brings together all these different traditions.
He does weave together so many elements that can pull all these things to your mind. It's incredibly brilliant. But they start to have concern, of course, about where they go when they die. They don't know. And nobody, that's the whole thing. They start to get jealous about the Eldar. So I'm going to go ahead and read. We're going to kind of get to the heart of this chapter, or this. I'm sorry, the heart of this half of the chapter, the heart of the reading tonight. But we're going to break it down into three pieces. This is the message of the Valar, and I'm going to start down at the bottom here. The Eldar reported these words to the Valar, tattletales. And Manwë,
why'd you snitch, man?
I know, snitch, dude. And Manwë was grieved, seeing a cloud gather on the noontide of Númenor. And he sent messengers to the Dunedain, who spoke earnestly to the king and to all who would listen, concerning the fate and fashion of the world. The doom of the world, they said, one alone can change who made it. And were you so to voyage, that escaping all deceits and snares, you came indeed to Aman, the blessed realm, little would it profit you. For it is not the land of Manwë that makes its people deathless, but the deathless that dwell therein have hallowed the land.
Mm-hmm.
And there you would but wither and grow weary the sooner, as moths in a light too strong and steadfast. So I wanted to stop there because there's so much to start unpacking.
Yeah. Well, and we've talked about, we've talked about this idea that it is not the land that makes the people deathless.
Right.
They are the Undying Lands because the deathless dwell there.
Yeah. And the lands have been hallowed, and you're not going to want to be there. You don't belong there. Your nature is incompatible.
Yeah, and then Tolkien, we'll get to in a moment. There's some really interesting stuff Tolkien has written about some of the what ifs of what would happen if
we
immortal
each have some pieces from that. I know.
Yeah,
there's so much because that's one of those really popular questions.
It is,
and it's a valid question. But before we get to that, there's something that is in this passage that you almost miss. But you noticed it. We were talking about it beforehand. It was the noontide.
The word noontide. Yeah. Yep. It's the exact same word Tolkien used way back in chapter 6 when he was talking about the noontide of the Blessed Realm. This is when the Noldor were still, when the Noldor were still living in Valinor, right before our favorite pinata Feanor showed up. And I think you had the observation when we talked about it many months ago that
a year ago
this is a sign that the clock is ticking. This is the zenith. The sun is at the zenith right now. This is the noontide, but it's about to get a whole lot darker.
Yeah.
Very foreboding, this concept of a noontide.
The noontide, exactly. I mean, it sounds great. You're walking around, it's the middle of the day, it's sunny, but it's not going to get any brighter. It's only going to get darker now.
Right.
And that's really important. So yeah, that's a really big clue that things are starting to go downhill. But I love
history has a way of repeating itself,
doesn't it?
This world,
it really does.
Yeah,
it really does. There's so many echoes of the fall here, of the fall of the elves here.
Yep.
I really do wish we got more on the initial fall of men. A little bit. I'd like to.
Oh yeah, like that. Yeah, there's that little bit in the tale of Adonel.
Yeah,
but that's really all we get. It's really, really short.
It really is. So the message now, just again to put this in the timeline, right? We've jumped around a lot. We talked about the first ships that landed. Those in Middle Earth were between 590 and 740, and then we jumped forward over 1,000 years to the shadow falling on them around Second Age 1800. This message actually comes to Tar Atanamir. He's the 13th king, and it's sometime. So we don't know the exact year the message comes, but he became king in 2029. And died in 2221. So we're talking the shadow had been on, let's ballpark that at somewhere around 2100. So we're talking about 300 years of the shadow, but over 2,000 years of the Númenórean kingdom.
Of Númenor.
So that's important.
Wow. Staggering number.
Isn't it? Really is.
We just can't even imagine.
2,000 years. I mean, how many kingdoms have been around for 2,000 years?
Right.
Uninterrupted kingdoms. I mean, we could talk about certain countries that have been around that long, but they're not the same countries that they were 2,000
right,
years
exactly,
ago.
Yeah.
But the messenger really starts to lay things out. This is that explanation we wish they would have given him 2,000 years before, but I don't know if it would have made the difference. Let's go ahead and bring in some of those texts you were talking about from Morgoth's Ring. Was it Aman and Mortal Men?
Sure. Yeah, there's an essay called Aman and Mortal Men that talks about what would happen if you, a mortal, came to the Undying Lands. And as Tolkien parsed this out, the ban of the Valar actually was mercy.
Right.
Because of the things that would happen if a mortal was allowed to live in the Undying Lands. Basically, what Tolkien presented is basically a couple of different possibilities of what would happen.
Okay.
So say that you, Alan, a mortal, have been invited to live in the Undying Lands.
Well, to suggest I am a mere mortal is...
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
Indeed.
All right, so let's say that me, a mere mortal...
No, you know what? Some horrible things are going to happen to you.
Well over half my mortal life.
No, some horrible things are going to happen to you, so I don't want to think of it being you. I'm going to think of it... Let's make up a person, Bob. So Bob is invited to come to the Undying Lands. One of two things is going to happen, according to Tolkien. Either he would live out his normal lifespan among the immortals, which to him would seem like he's aging quickly while everything around him doesn't change at all.
That makes sense.
And Tolkien says he would become filled with envy, deeming himself a victim of injustice, being denied the graces given to all other things. Now, of course, it's not all other things, it's just
Right.
everything around him. Tolkien goes on to say he would not value what he had. He would grow soon to contemn his manhood and hate those more richly endowed. He would not escape the fear and sorrow of his swift mortality that is his lot upon earth in Ardamard, but would be burdened by it unbearably to the loss of all delight.
Oh, wow.
And I should go back and define that word contemn because I had to look it up. Basically, he would have contempt for his manhood.
Okay. That makes sense.
He would hate his own lot, and he would hate those who have more than he does. And so he would not escape the fear and sorrow of mortality.
No.
It would quite be the opposite. He would be burdened by it unbearably.
It would be more conscious of it than ever.
Right,
Yeah.
because he would be surrounded by others who don't have it. Think of the Númenóreans and how much they're surrounded by the knowledge of it, just because the Eldar show up from time to time.
Right. The firstborn
just 'cause
keeps
they-
showing up.
Right, and just
That's
because
the
they
same
every
guy
once in a
over and
while
over
pop
again.
into, yeah, and every once in a while when they go over to Middle Earth, they pop into Gil-galad's house, and
Right.
they how much it consumes them
Yeah.
when they can always go back home. Imagine how it would be for Bob.
My goodness. Poor Bob.
Poor Bob, indeed. The other possibility for Bob, according to Tolkien, is okay. Let's say that he could be given the immortality of the elves.
Okay.
Now, this is corporeal immortality. It's the longevity of the Hroa, because the Hroa is what is of Arda. The Hroa is what's made from matter.
Right.
That's what
right.
the
It's
Valar
the physical
could-
part
could
of his
have-
body.
Right. That's what the Valar could affect, because the Valar have power over Arda. The
If they
Fëa
could
is
affect that. But yeah.
if they could even do that. The Fëa is something that's given to him by Ilúvatar, and the Valar cannot change that.
That's true.
So Tolkien says very soon then, I guess I should say, so the Hroa would be immortal, but the Fëa would still not be
Ooh.
immortal.
Ooh, that would be bad.
The Fëa would start to weaken, would start to
Yeah.
get old. And Tolkien says very soon then, the Fëa and Hroa would not be united and at peace. Remember how much he talks about
Yes.
the union of Fëa and Hroa, and
How
that,
important
you know,
that is.
Right. He says they would not be at peace, but would be opposed to the great pain of both. The Hroa, being in full vigor and joy of life, would cling to the Fëa, lest its departure should bring death. And against death it would revolt, as would a great beast in full life either flee from the hunter or turn savagely upon him. But the Fëa would be, as it were, in prison,
Ooh.
becoming ever more weary of all the delights of the Hroa, until they were loathsome to it. The man would not be blessed, but accursed, and he would curse the Valar and Aman and all the things of Arda.
Oh, wow.
And ultimately, he would basically go insane,
Yeah.
is where
Oh,
that paragraph ends.
Goodness.
So this is what the Band of the Valar is sparing the Númenóreans from.
Right.
They don't know that. But this is just to illustrate how flawed the concept is that they could
really
go to the
is.
Undying Lands. It is not, you said this, it is not their nature to live there. Their
No.
nature is not to be immortal. And because of their nature, they basically just couldn't deal with it.
Exactly. Well,
You
and
know?
there's even another quote from Tolkien about that, about nature or kind. This is it's actually in a footnote to one of his letters. I don't have the letter number handy off this one, but he says that each kind has a natural span integral to its biological and spiritual nature. So that would be the Hroa and the Fëa. This cannot really be increased qualitatively or quantitatively. So prolongation in time is like stretching a wire out ever tauter or spreading butter ever thinner. It becomes an
right.
intolerable
Yeah.
torment.
Yeah. Okay.
And boy, does that put Bilbo's words into a little better context.
Yeah.
That becomes an intolerable torment.
You really feel
Just having
the torments.
Yeah. His
Can you
Fëa and
imagine what
Hroa are
Gollum
out of
feels like?
sync. Yeah.
Wow.
That's the thing, is his...
Boy, that
his-
tells you so much about like Gollum and the ring wraiths.
Yeah, it
and-
does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Oh man, the ring wraiths. Well, their butter's gone. I mean, it's been spread so thin. It's yeah. But that's the thing. Their Fëa and their Hroa aren't in sync anymore. But yeah, my goodness.
Wow.
You know, there's more. You know, I mean, I think people always talk about what they read in the appendices, right? About Frodo and other mortals who get there. Well, what
Sure,
happened to
yeah.
them? They're not going to, you know, what a terrible thing for them to be filled with envy or to then, you know, have their Fëa and Hroa out of sync. But, you know, he addresses that. In letter 154, Tolkien acknowledges that certain mortals who've played a great part in elvish affairs may pass with the elves to Elvenhome. Now, we're talking about just Eresia, not Valinor.
Right.
Thus Frodo by the express gift of Arwen, and Bilbo, and eventually Sam as adumbrated by Frodo, and as a unique exception, Gimli the dwarf as a friend of Legolas and servant of Galadriel. But Tolkien goes on to add that this is strictly only a temporary reward, a healing and redress of suffering. They cannot abide forever, and though they cannot return to mortal earth, they can and will die of free will and leave the world.
Okay.
He says it again, even in another letter, 325. This is a little shorter, thankfully. He says that as for Frodo or other mortals, they could only dwell in Aman for a limited time, whether brief or long. The Valar had neither the power nor the right to confer immortality upon them. Their sojourn was a purgatory, but one of peace and healing, and they would eventually pass away, die at their own desire and of free will, to destinations of which the elves knew nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that. Well, so much for the ambiguous Arthurian ending, right? Because
yeah,
he spells it out right there.
We just unambiguified it.
Ooh, yeah. Is that a word?
I don't think Tolkien would call it a word.
It is now. It's an Alan Sisto original.
We're going to try unambiguifying a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that really spells it right out. So
it does, really, really clear.
So what's clear here is that Frodo and the others were not given extra life. They were just allowed to live out their normal span in peace and in comfort.
Healing. Yeah,
with healing.
Exactly.
And given the choice to die when they were ready. And
exactly.
And
to
being
get their
who they were.
Roas back into sync, right? I mean, Bilbo's body after the ring had left his possession, he ages
was getting
rapidly.
out of sync. The butter spread over too much bread, yeah.
Right, exactly. Mm-hmm. My goodness. Good stuff.
Got to get your Fae and your Hoa back in sync, buddy. Here's your problem.
There's your problem right there, your Fae and your Hoa.
Your Fae and your Hoa. What you got there, your Fae, it's out of sync with your Hoa.
We need to adjust the timing belt and try to get that.
It's going to cost about $800.
Exactly. We're going to have to order the part, though. It's not going to come in tomorrow.
It's out west. We'll have to get it from out west.
I only got one guy that can install these things. All right. Goofy stuff. But of course, anytime a rational argument is made to an irrational person, they respond with, "But you,"
with irrationality.
Let me have you take the next chunk.
All right. But the king said, "And does not Eärendil, my forefather, live? Or is he not in the land of Aman?" To which they answered, "You know that he has a fate apart, and was a judge to the firstborn who die not. Yet this also is his doom, that he can never return again to mortal lands. Whereas you and your people are not of the firstborn, but are mortal men, as Ilúvatar made you. Yet it seems that you desire now to have the good of both kindreds, to sail to Valinor when you will, and to return when you please to your homes. That cannot be. Nor can the Valar take away the gifts of Ilúvatar. The Eldar, you say, are unpunished, and even those who rebel do not die. Yet that is to them neither reward nor punishment, but the fulfillment of their being.
Mm-hmm.
They cannot escape, and are bound to this world, never to leave it so long as it lasts, for its life is theirs. And you are punished for the rebellion of men, you say, in which you had small part, and so it is that you die. But that was not at first appointed for a punishment.
Yep.
Thus you escape, and leave the world, and are not bound to it, in hope or in weariness. Which of us therefore should envy the others?"
Boy, isn't that a great... I love that response.
It's great. So on the nose. I mean,
it
just
really
like laying it all out. Like, hey, man, come on.
You know better.
That's my favorite. At the very beginning, like,
You know better.
You know that's not right. You know better.
Eärendil's not a man anymore.
Yep.
Yeah. They want the best of both worlds, which, great Star Trek episode, but that's not the point.
They want it all.
They do.
And they want it now. It ain't much they're asking if you want the truth. Told you we'd get another.
Man, well done, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now I've got that song stuck in my head.
There are worse songs.
That's true. There are. Maybe when they get to Middle Earth, they'll sing "We Are the Champions."
Maybe so. And Queen really works as a soundtrack.
Doesn't it? I know, and yet
Númenor.
and yet those will not be the titles.
No.
Oh goodness.
We got
maybe
other
somewhere else. We do. My goodness, the stuff here. I mean, That cannot be. We cannot take away the gifts of Iluvatar. And he reminds him, look, this isn't our living forever. Well, not living forever. Our living as long as the earth exists is not. It's not a reward or a punishment.
Not a reward.
It's just who we are.
Yeah.
It's just
the
who we are.
fulfillment of their being.
That's all
it's just
it is.
Their nature. It's just their nature. What you're asking for is not in your nature. Well, what is it? It's on the previous page of my ebook now, but what is it? That cannot be.
That cannot be. I love that. That's a very blunt statement.
Yeah.
That cannot be. To have the best of both worlds. It's not. It's just not the way it is.
Yeah.
My goodness. And the fact that death was not appointed for a punishment. We'll get to that a little bit more.
Sure. Yeah.
I want to keep moving, but that's good stuff. So the Númenóreans respond. The Númenóreans answered, "Why should we not envy the Valar, or even the least of the deathless? For of us is required a blind trust and a hope without assurance, knowing not what lies before us in a little while. And yet we also love the earth and would not lose it." Then the messengers said, "Indeed, the mind of Iluvatar concerning you is not known to the Valar, and he has not revealed all things that are to come. But this we hold to be true, that your home is not here, neither in the land of Aman, nor anywhere within the circles of the world. And the doom of men that they should depart was at first a gift of Iluvatar. It became a grief to them only because coming under the shadow of Morgoth, it seemed to them that they were surrounded by a great darkness, of which they were afraid. And some grew willful and proud, and would not yield, until life was reft from them. We who bear the ever-mounting burden of the years do not clearly understand this. But if that grief has returned to trouble you, as you say, then we fear that the shadow arises once more and grows again in your hearts. Therefore, though you be the Dunedain, fairest of men, who escaped from the shadow of old and fought valiantly against it, we say to you, beware! The will of Eru may not be gainsaid, and the Valar bid you earnestly not to withhold the trust to which you are called, lest soon it become again a bond by which you are constrained. Hope rather that in the end even the least of your desires shall have fruit. The love of Arda was set in your hearts by Iluvatar, and he does not plant to no purpose. Nonetheless, many ages of men unborn may pass ere that purpose is made known, and to you it will be revealed, and not to the Valar." My goodness.
Man, there's a lot there.
There is a ton there. The blind trust.
I guess we
thing.
Start with the blind trust. Yeah. To me, I felt like they were misinterpreting Estel. I kind of felt like this was a negative spin on Estel. We talked about that.
It'll be interesting. I'd love to know, be a fly on the wall for that conversation. I kind of get the feeling maybe they're talking about two different things. Like the messengers are saying to hope, right? To let's see if they say here, where you said, earnestly, the Valar bid you earnestly not to withhold the trust, hope rather that in the end. They're using Estel for hope, and I think the Númenóreans are saying for us is required an
You're
Amdir.
requiring Amdir of us. Yeah,
Amdir,
I think you're right. Yeah,
which is
hope without reassurance.
Right. Like I hope the weather's nice today. I hope I win the lottery. It's
hope without assurance. Excuse me. I said
right.
assurance, but yeah,
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And it's this back and forth. Like they're not even talking about the same hope.
Yeah.
Or even understanding what it means to trust. I just can't. I just get the feeling that's what's going on here. Is they're talking at cross purposes to some extent.
That could be. I think that's a really good argument.
It's hard to say because it's we're not reading it in the original language. But
no, it's probably a good thing. That would take us a very long time to get through. Oh
my goodness! Yes, it would. We'd have like 7 listeners.
Yeah.
Oh goodness. The will of Eru cannot be opposed. You've got to trust him and hope. That's really the end of the message here. The will of Eru may not be gainsaid. You can't do anything against what he has determined. So please just trust him. He put this love for the earth in your hearts. That's not going to be for no reason. You may not be here anymore when we know that purpose, but you've got to trust.
Yeah. But there's also this little, what's the word? I don't know, but they're kind of a little bit of a pat on the back for men here because it's, look, when it's revealed, when Iluvatar's purpose is revealed, it's going to be revealed to you and not to the Valar.
Not to the Valar. The Valar won't
It's
know.
a reminder. It's a reminder that, men do have a special purpose on Earth.
Very.
And, we get some of that in the Outhabeth.
That's true.
And we've talked a little bit about that, I think, when we went back to episode 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just like, just trust, and all will be revealed in time. And guess what? You're going to be taken care of.
Yeah.
You
just have to trust. It may not be the
fine.
way you want it to be, but you will be, your purpose will be indicated. You will achieve what you're intended to achieve, and it just may take some time for that to happen. But coming back to this mortality thing, there's another great quote that fits here really well. This one's from Letter 212. Have we mentioned that you all should read letters by J.R.R. Tolkien before? Have we said you should get that book? Because you really should. I mean,
if you haven't figured it out by now, we use it a lot.
So he says in this one, in this mythical prehistory, immortality, strictly longevity, coextensive with the life of Arda, was part of the given nature of the elves. Beyond the end, nothing was revealed. Mortality, that is a short lifespan, having no relation to the life of Arda, is spoken of as the given nature of men. The elves called it the gift of Iluvatar, God. To attempt by device or magic to recover longevity is thus a supreme folly and wickedness of mortals. Longevity, or counterfeit immortality, since true immortality is beyond Ea, is the chief bait of Sauron. It leads the small to a golem and the great to a ringwraith. And I love that last line.
Wow. Yeah.
I mean,
well, there you go. I was just talking about, imagine Gollum and the ringwraiths, and here they are mentioned. And I've read this letter before. Wasn't even thinking about this.
No.
That's great.
It really is. So, we see, like we talked about, this is in the days of Tar Kiryatan and Tar Atanamir. So now Númenor goes downhill. Like we said, it's the noontide, right? The zenith of its bliss. I'm going to have you read a very short passage. I think this is really telling, if you want to take this next one.
Yep. But Atanamir was ill pleased with the counsel of the messengers, and gave little heed to it. And the greater part of his people followed him, for they wished still to escape death in their own day, not waiting upon hope. And Atanamir lived to a great age, clinging to his life beyond the end of all joy. And he was the first of the Númenóreans to do this, refusing to depart until he was witless and unmanned, and denying to his son the kingship at the height of his days.
Oh, witless and unmanned.
Witless and unmanned. That's a little taste of that that Hroa and Fea being out of sync, isn't it?
That's exactly it. Yeah. My goodness. And this is just out of, his increase in power, increase in wealth, and in all of these other things, but he's just not satisfied.
Yeah.
Discontent, really, a lack of contentedness is such a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. It really is.
Boy,
be happy with what you have. It doesn't mean that you can't strive to be the best.
No, of course.
Do the best with what you've got. But
right.
Find your peace, find your content.
Happiness is what's important. Just ask those tra-la-la-la-ly elves, right?
Yeah, totally.
Down here in the valley.
Hey, that is
we are
important.
so happy. Sorry, I don't mean to tease. I do, but still.
I love the tra-la-la-lally elves.
I know you do, more than I do.
Well, that's not saying much.
No, that's probably not.
I guess I'll be reading that passage when we get to it.
Probably, yeah. You can have dibs on that one. It is interesting that because he refused to, that he clung to his life, that he broke the pattern of giving the kingship to the son. We don't see that in that passage. It's in the next line there, but that the normal tradition had previously been to give the kingship to the sons once they're, fully grown. And then I guess, going off and laying yourself down on the halls of the kings and dying. Which, of course...
Basically what we saw with Aragorn in the appendix to Lord of the Rings.
Exactly, that willing surrender of your life. It's a totally different ballgame than what we saw with, let's say, Denethor. Very, radically different. But it also...
Well, I suppose Denethor did willingly surrender it at the end.
Well, right, but that's the whole...
Peacefully.
Actively, there's a difference.
Oh, right, I see. He didn't willingly surrender. He
tried to speed up the
threw
process.
It on a fire, basically.
Yeah, literally. Put a little accelerant on there. And
yeah, right. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, the kingship would pass. So typically, what do you mean you're going to give up your kingship and go die when your son's fully grown? Well, they didn't have their kids until very late in their lives. They didn't even marry until very late in their lives. So that's an interesting little thing. Maybe that's one of the reasons they weren't so happy. I don't know.
Well, I think there's a little bit of elvishness there, but obviously they
because elves didn't even hit like their puberty and adulthood until about 50, if I remember correctly.
Right.
Or at least that's when they got married, I think.
Yeah.
So Autonomir's son, pretty much just like his dad, and in his day, the people become split. You've got the king's men; they're the ones who don't like the Valar, don't like the ban, really ticked off, angry, unhappy, get off my lawn kind of people. And then you've got the Elendil, you say that, the elf friends.
The Elendili?
The Elendili, thank you. I wanted to say Elendili. Elendili. Yeah, that's just bad. I don't want to go there. The Elendili, the elf friends. So they of course want to keep connection with the Eldar.
Right.
But everybody's troubled by death. So
Sure.
Everything starts to kind of go downhill. But this is really interesting. Earlier they didn't understand the purpose, but they were, happy and still obeyed it. Now they don't love the Valar, but they fear them, so they still won't break the ban, but they'll complain.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yes.
this is where things start to really go downhill. So I'm going to go ahead and pick up, starting a couple paragraphs or starting the next paragraph down.
All right.
But the fear of death grew ever darker upon them, and they delayed it by all means that they could. And they began to build great houses for their dead, while their wise men labored unceasingly to discover, if they might, the secret of recalling life, or at the least of the prolonging of men's days. Yet they achieved only the art of preserving incorrupt the dead flesh of men, and they filled all the land with silent tombs in which the thought of death was enshrined in the darkness. But those that lived turned the more eagerly to pleasure and revelry, desiring ever more goods and more riches. And after the days of Tar and Kalaman, the offering of the first fruits to Eru was neglected, and men went seldom any more to the hollow upon the heights of Meneltarma in the midst of the land.
Wow.
So sad to see this rapid downhill.
Just really, very rapid downhill. And boy, classic response to not getting what you want, right? I mean, you can't afford that, I don't know, that purse or that designer, garment that you want. Go buy the cheap knockoff,
Can't get immortality, go buy some oil of Olay.
Superficial oil of Olay. Don't forget.
The oil of Olay.
We had to bring that back.
We did.
Yeah,
that was a brilliant one, by the way.
Thank you. Superficial alternatives, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you can't, let's do what you can to prolong men's days through, maybe drugs or, maybe some sort of medicine,
Right.
but also preserving incorrupt the dead flesh. Just embalming, maybe mummification. I mean, you talked about the Egyptians. This is, this
is where it comes full to the fore. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you're starting to see just this obsession with death turn into an obsession with the flesh, right?
Well, if I can't live forever, I can at least look good when I die.
Right. Leave a good-looking corpse and make sure it's still good-looking for thousands of years. And it's interesting how much this idea of these tombs that they're just obsessed with death. It reminds me so much of Faramir's words about Gondor.
Yes.
To Frodo and Sam about sort of the, not quite the fall of Gondor, but the last kings. We really see history repeat. Yeah. Faramir says, kings made tombs more splendid than houses of the living, and counted old names in the rolls of their descent dearer than the names of sons. He's talking about the last days of the kings of Gondor, not Númenor,
right.
but it sounds
sounds
exactly
like
the
Númenor.
same. Yeah. Childless lords sat in aged halls musing on heraldry. In secret chambers, withered men compounded strong elixirs, or in high cold towers asked questions of the stars.
My goodness.
I mean, it's exactly
Really does. That sounds exactly like Númenor.
Yeah, down to strong elixirs to get stronger. This,
and then astrology.
Astrology, just looking for answers in places where you're not going to get them.
No, the answers have already been given to you. You just don't like them.
Right.
You want
exactly.
different answers.
Mm-hmm.
And they turn, that while they're alive, they just dig more into earthly pleasures, and revelry and wealth and
Well, that's
more stuff.
yeah. I mean, well, that's like classic response to not getting what you want. Number two, right? I mean,
Yeah.
just hedonism.
Yeah, it's
It's
true.
just,
Make
all
myself
right,
happy.
just yeah,
Whatever makes me happy.
yeah. Whatever makes me happy right now.
Yeah. And you know what? I think it's really telling that it was during this time that the offering of the first fruits to Eru was neglected, and it's during this time that the downfall really takes off. The Hallow isn't visited anymore, so the king isn't doing those three, offerings of prayer, offerings
Right.
of thanks, and offerings of praise. That's a problem, and we're going to see real soon that the men of Númenor will worship something, and if they won't worship God, they'll worship something else.
Yeah.
And that's true. I mean, if we don't worship God, we'll worship something else. It's usually just ourselves, but that certainly seems to be the truth that Tolkien is referring to here. They're not content with their own land. I love this little line. We didn't read this paragraph, but their own land seemed shrunken. They had no rest or content, so they start building big settlements on the western shores. But now, they're showing up as
they're becoming an imperial power now.
exactly an imperial force. They are lording it over and gathering tribute. There's a letter,
just like the wicked men did.
exactly. I don't have it here with me. I didn't put it in my notes, but he talks about now they're tax collectors. And
they were these givers of knowledge and wisdom and technology, and now they're just
taking
tribute. Yeah,
because they can, and they need to feed their own material desires at this point.
Well, that's classic response number 3. Just take it out on somebody else.
Just
it's like you feel powerless, right? You feel like you can't get what you want, so just go take it out on somebody weaker than you.
Exactly. Don't pick on anybody your own size. Go push around the little guy.
Yeah.
The people who think you're a god, it's pretty easy to beat them up if they're that technically backwards.
Right. Yeah.
So, man, what a mess. And
wow.
But the elf friends kept their friendship with Gil-galad, with the elves. They were at this point fighting with Sauron, who we're going to get to momentarily. And they build Pelargir.
Pelargir, the haven to the south? It's the southern part of Gondor, right?
Yeah. South of Minas Tirith. If you follow the Anduin down, it ends up being that's where Aragorn and the after he comes out of the Paths of the Dead, he's got the.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
He goes and takes the army and goes down there and gets the Umbars of the Corsairs of Umbar off their ships,
and then he sails those up the Anduin from Pelargir. That's right.
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
So now that places you in the story now, so you can kind of get your bearings.
Very old city.
Very old city. But now we get into Sauron
and the Kingsmen also. I like this. The Kingsmen left rumors in the Legends of Men.
Oh, that is key. You're right.
Another reference to this idea that this is a real story that happened.
Ding, ding, ding.
We don't know which rumors he's talking about, but we can probably imagine some of our earliest stories about wicked rulers and corrupt empires would have been these guys.
You're right. You're
Kingsmen.
Absolutely right. They've left the rumors in the Legends of Men. So men have these stories of these terrible, terrible people that came.
Yeah.
And so our legends would fit that. Ooh, that's good. Good catch. Good catch. I'm going to have you read the next little bit about Sauron, and we're going to start talking some timeline stuff here.
Enter Sauron. All right. In this age, as is elsewhere told, Sauron arose again in Middle-earth, and grew, and turned back to the evil in which he was nurtured by Morgoth, becoming mighty in his service. Already in the days of Tar-Minestir, the 11th king of Númenor, he had fortified the land of Mordor, and had built there the tower of Barad-dûr. And thereafter he strove ever for the dominion of Middle-earth, to become a king over all kings, and as a god unto men. And Sauron hated the Númenóreans because of the deeds of their fathers and their ancient alliance with the elves and allegiance to the Valar. Nor did he forget the aid that Tar-Minestir had rendered to Gil-galad of old, in that time when the One Ring was forged, and there was war between Sauron and the elves in Eriador.
And that's why I want to bring in the timeline, because you're like, what? In the time when the what?
Right.
I mean, whoa, that came out of nowhere.
And presumably you've heard of the One Ring if you're reading the Silmarillion.
Presumably you have.
But it's not been mentioned because it's all in the next chapter, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, of the Rings of Power in the Third Age. But it is really important to kind of get a grasp of the timeline here, because we went forward and now we're going back.
Okay.
So he arrived. A lot of this information is going to come from the Rings of Power in the Third Age. It's also going to come from not the Rings of Power in the Third Age, but the Rings of Power, which comes from Lord of the Rings Appendix B. And some of it I've also pulled from Chapter 3 of Unfinished Tales, Second Age part, the Line of Elros, Kings of Númenor. So that's how I'm fitting these things in. So let's kind of walk through this.
You're such an overachiever with your research. I feel like I got to...
you've got the word nerdery. I've got the math and the years.
That's great.
So we'll figure it out. Now, if one of us could ever figure out how to actually keep a podcast under 2 hours, that would be helpful.
That would be great. Yeah.
So the growing in strength is around Second Age 500. He builds Barad-dûr around Second Age 1000. Around Second Age 1500, the forging of the rings begins. Those are completed around 1590. So apparently it takes them a very long time to forge these rings. And it's around 1600 that the One Ring is forged. So we're already, 1600. And you're like, wait a minute, didn't we just see something that was happening in like the 2100s? Yeah. Now we're going back to talk about Sauron. Right. So
talk about what Sauron's been doing.
The message, the One Ring was made 500 years before the messengers came from Valinor to tell Tar Minister or Tar. No, that was not Tar Minister. That was Tar Autonomir.
Tar Autonomir, yeah.
Before they came to him to tell him the message. So we're going back in time.
So the shadow fell around 1800, so that would have been shortly after the One Ring was forged.
That's correct. 200 years later. Yeah.
I don't know for sure that those are connected, but I suppose it is possible.
Well, I think you'll find that some of it is, and we'll get to that in the timeline, because during the reigns of the ninth king, Tar-Surion, and the second ruling queen, Tar-Telperion, is when this would have happened, the forging of the Rings of Power. So about 100 years after the One Ring, 1693, I know we had a lot of the other stuff was around, but the timeline actually gives us a specific year for this. 1693, the War of the Elves and Sauron begins. Sauron's victorious 6 years later, by 1699. That includes the death of Celebrimbor, Moria's gates are shut, and then Elrond takes some of the people who escape and founds Imladris.
Okay.
So a year later, 1700, Tar Minister sends a great navy to Lindon and defeats Sauron. So now skip forward even much further, now to 2251. So this is the death of Autonomir and the reign of his son Ankalaman.
Ankalaman, okay.
The Nazgûl start to appear.
Ooh.
Now, 3 of the 9 Nazgûl were said to be great lords of Númenor. We don't know who.
Oh, right, yeah.
But isn't that intriguing? So I think the shadow...
People seeking after immortality.
Yeah. People seeking after immortality, and they find it. So these would be people who had come and, built up these strong towers in Middle-earth and somehow ended up in contact with Sauron, who said, you want immortality? I got something for you. So that's the timeline. Yeah. And that's really helpful, I think, to understand just what's going on here. So the shadow...
One has to imagine that the Nazgûl Lord was a Númenórean, right? I mean, I know we're never told this, but...
Yeah, no, he's got to be.
If any of them were, he would have to be.
Yeah, I know there's some great speculations about the actual identities of some of these, of the 3 Nazgûl that were Númenórean, but it's all speculation.
Yeah, so Tolkien hasn't left us anything there.
Nope, nothing at all. So that was, again, just really important to kind of get a feel for that Sauron, even with the One Ring, which was around 1600, didn't do anything to attack Númenor.
Yeah.
Even with that, because he didn't want to challenge them. He withdrew from the coasts.
Right.
Because he didn't want to poke the bear.
Right.
Really.
That's really interesting.
Yeah,
because they're an imperial power now. They are. They're a threat.
And we'll see that he eventually sees that his opportunity is different than just straight military victory.
Yep.
So let's go ahead and read. I'm going to go ahead and read the next paragraph here. In those days, the shadow grew deeper upon Númenor, and the lives of the kings of the house of Elros waned because of their rebellion. But they hardened their hearts the more against the Valar. And the 20th king took the scepter of his fathers, and he ascended the throne in the name of Adunachor, Lord of the West, forsaking the elven tongues and forbidding their use in his hearing. Yet in the scroll of kings, the name Hirunumen was inscribed in the High Elven speech. Did I pronounce that right? Hirunumen. That looks right.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I almost threw an extra syllable in there. Hirunumen.
Hirunumen.
So in the Scroll of Kings, the name Hirunumen was inscribed.
All those U's and N's and M's together.
They did kind of blur together, and it's late because we've been doing this for a long time now.
Yeah. Sorry.
That's okay. This was inscribed in the High Elven speech because of ancient custom, which the kings feared to break utterly, lest evil befall. Now, this title seemed to the faithful overproud, being the title of the Valar, and their hearts were sorely tried between their loyalty to the House of Elros and their reverence of the appointed powers. But worse was yet to come. For Ar-Gimilzor, the 23rd king, was the greatest enemy of the faithful. In his day, the white tree was untended and began to decline, and he forbade utterly the use of the elven tongues, and punished those that welcomed the ships of Eressia, that still came secretly to the west shores of the land.
Well, there you go.
It went downhill, and now it's just like gone right off the edge.
Oh, yeah. So
Adunachor,
wow.
Yeah. Before we even get to that, I want to jump on one phrase. They hardened their hearts. You know, we talked about the Egyptians and the similarities. This makes me think of Pharaoh. Who is said to have hardened his heart. Every time, Moses would say something to him, all right, fine, I'll let your people go. And then he would harden his heart and say, nope, change my mind. And
we see this again later, don't we?
We do. With
Farazan.
Yes, we do. So just another interesting little comparison. Hardened the hearts. They hardened their hearts the more. So, instead of learning their lesson and saying, wow, we're dying at younger ages, gee, I wonder why, they're basically just, screw the man.
Right, exactly. Well, it's that doubling down on their pride and folly that we talked about that, that always precedes, Feanor. Classic Feanor.
It really is. But it's classic pride. I mean, Turin doubled down, a lot of, that's just what prideful people do.
Melkor did.
Oh, absolutely. He was chastised, and then out of his shame came secret anger.
Right.
Instead of repentance. That's the key. Every single time when you make a mistake, you make a bad decision, and you're presented with consequences, do you respond out of repentance like Aule did after making the doors, or do you respond with, whatever?
Doubling down and just whatever.
Yeah. And that's what they're doing here. So go ahead. Adunachor.
Yeah, Adunachor. Lord of the West.
You think Manway's rolling his eyes right now?
Yeah, exactly. It's probably he hasn't rolled his eyes this hard since Melkor said, "And I name this unto myself, and I name this unto myself." This does deeply trouble the faithful. They know that this is blasphemous.
Oh yeah,
there's no other word for it.
No.
And
yet they're supposed to still be loyal to the House of Elros. I mean, he is their king.
Yeah. Right.
They're not in open civil war or anything.
No. I mean, that's what's interesting about the faithful is that they're rule followers.
They are.
Maybe to a fault.
Maybe.
But they end up coming through, so it all works out.
It does.
But yeah, that's really interesting, and I love the fact that he won't document the name in Adonaic in the Scroll of Kings, because of ancient custom, which the kings feared to break utterly.
I don't mind.
Really, you're okay.
Totally blaspheming.
You're gonna take a name that
Lord of the West.
Only Manwë can wear rightfully.
Yeah.
But but I should still probably write it in Quenya.
Yeah.
Real tough guy here.
Seriously. Real tough guy.
It's I don't want to put it in writing or anything that we're going with Adonaic.
No, because
I'll put it in writing that I'm Lord of the West.
Oh, man, that's a good point. It really is.
But here we see another forbidding of
exactly
of the
bingo
Quenya, or the Elven tongue.
The Elven tongues and
Sindarin.
Well, it's Sindarin and Quenya.
It would be both. Yeah, exactly.
Right, because the lore masters were still using Quenya. So I mean, this is again language is culture, and we see just like when Thingol forbade the use of Quenya, what it did to that language and what it did to Noldoran culture. It's really interesting. Yeah, so Ar-Gimilzor is even worse, right? He all use of the Elven tongues now is forbidden. He's verboten.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, so much happened in that paragraph. Yeah, that was actually his son was. Yeah.
Well, Adunachor forbid the use of the Elven tongues in his hearing.
Right. Okay.
So
Yeah, but then it was our Gimmelzor that
said,
was
no, it's against the law completely now.
and forbidden
It's
utterly.
verboten.
Wow.
Yeah, and then he starts punishing the faithful.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
you
So
start getting
so it's gone
persecution.
from tolerant disagreement to
Right.
persecution.
Absolutely, in one generation.
Yeah.
Yeah, really bad news. Really, really bad news.
Very.
So, Manwë knows all. So he's, what does it say? The Valar were wroth with the kings of Númenor.
I got your Lord of the West right here, buddy.
Yeah, here's your Lord of the West. So the ships don't come anymore. So even the faithful are kind of left hanging,
Yeah.
But they're not gonna give. You're not getting anything anymore. You're not getting any protection. This is bad news.
Mm-hmm.
So Gimmelzor ends up marrying Inzilbeth. Now she's actually of the faithful, and bad idea. No love was there between these two.
No, not
or
at all.
between their sons, and we're going to get to talk about their sons here in a little bit. But before we do, this is as good a point as any to quote letter 131 again, because now we have persecution. And Tolkien explains that there are three phases.
Seriously, just buy the letters just for letter 131.
Well, actually it's in your forward.
I guess it's in the Silmarillion, so
just read it. So many people ask
don't tell
questions
them
that are like,
buy the letters anyway.
Buy the letters for sure. And let me tell you, I've had so much more enjoyment out of the letters now that I have an e-copy because it's more searchable.
Oh yeah,
I loved my paper copy and it's marked up like crazy. But the letters are so scattered and there's no chapter outlines or anything to go through it.
Right.
It's just chronological that it is very helpful to have a searchable version. So
I probably should invest in that, and I'm going to.
I just did like 2 weeks ago, and man, it's been
really?
worth it. Yeah, it really has been helpful.
I'm going to blame my faulty research on that until I have one.
Oh goodness! So here's the quote. He's talking about the fall of the Númenóreans. He says there are three phases in their fall from grace. First, acquiescence, obedience that is free and willing, though without complete understanding. So that's them when they didn't get the explanation of the ban, but they obeyed. Then we get, then for long they obey unwillingly, murmuring more and more openly. Okay, so that's the stage we just saw end a little while ago. Now we get his last line. Finally they rebel, and a rift appears between the king's men and rebels and the small minority of persecuted faithful. So anyway, just I thought a good point to squeeze that in. But
yeah, very.
Let me have you take the next little bit about what happens when the good son gets to be king.
All right.
Because I just can't wait to be king.
To be king. Oh man, we've gone from Queen to Simba.
That's just us. We digress.
That's just us. All right. But when Inziladun acceded to the scepter, he took again a title in the elven tongue as of old, calling himself Tar Palantir, for he was far-sighted both in eye and in mind, and even those that hated him feared his words as those of a true seer. He gave peace for a while to the faithful, and he went once more at due seasons to the hallow of Eru upon the Meneltarma, which Ar-Gimmelzor had forsaken. The white tree he tended again with honor, and he prophesied, saying that when the tree perished, then also would the line of the kings come to its end. But his repentance was too late to appease the anger of the Valar with the insolence of his fathers, of which the greater part of his people did not repent.
And you have to wonder, what if the greater part of his people had repented? What if he was able to convince them that, what if the kingsmen became the minority? I don't know. That's just another one of those what ifs.
Well, I mean, certainly the text seems to suggest that, the fact that this is mentioned as a factor.
Yeah. But it's the insolence of his fathers that is what is, the anger of the Valar is towards. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true, but
yeah,
I don't know.
I love his name, Tar Palantir, far-sighted.
Yeah.
A wise.
Both in eye and mind. It's sort of literally and figuratively.
Yeah. What do your Tar Palantir eyes see? I'm sorry, I couldn't help
They're
it.
taking the wisdom nowhere.
Taking the wisdom to Sauron.
They're leaving it there. It's saying it.
They're taking the immortality to Valinor. Goodness. Yeah, I have to tell you real briefly, this reminds me, again, because so much of this really does remind you of like the Israelites and the Egyptians and stuff like that. This reminded me of and I had to look it up. I'm so sorry. I had to look up which king it was. I just remember there was a good king after some bad kings. But Josiah, the king of Judah, and this is a story that Tolkien would have been familiar with, of course. The previous kings right before him, Manasseh and Aman, had done great evil. But Josiah attempted reform. He repented. They found some of the old law in the temple when they were going in there. And so he tried to fix things. God ended up telling him, look, I'm still going to bring disaster to the people, but I'm going to spare you by waiting until after your death. And sure enough, he dies in battle, and 12 years later, Jerusalem's captured by the Babylonians, and the Israelites are hauled off into exile. One good king can't undo the evil of the ones before. So
that's interesting.
It really jumped out.
You're right. That's another example of how Tolkien just kind of grabs a little bit from all these different traditions.
A little bit here, a little bit there. I mean, again, this is not that. This is not a one-to-one.
Right.
I'm not trying to draw allegories or analogies. I'm just saying, isn't that interesting?
No, but these are the things that Tolkien put into the soup. It's fascinating.
It's just another little piece of the soup. Ooh, that's a tasty bite. So let's move on to the next bite. So no
this
ship
last
comes.
Bite.
Yeah,
this last bite bites.
You might feel a little indigestion after this last bite. Let's see. How does Pharazôn become king? Well,
so he's the son of Gimel-Chad,
right, which is the brother of Inziladun,
right?
Tar-Palantir.
He's the king's man side of the family.
So he's the nephew of Tar-Palantir,
of the king. Yep. And so at this point, we haven't talked too much about Númenórean succession, but at this point, Númenóreans are actually succeeding the throne to the eldest child, even if it's
queen
a girl.
or king. Exactly. We've had
a few ruling queens by this point. Yeah.
So, and that's important to note because he does something that he shouldn't do. Tar-Palantir did have a daughter named Muriel, and she's supposed to get the scepter, but Pharazôn took her to wife against her will. No, terrible,
and first
terrible
cousins.
Thing. And first cousins, yeah. Which, we didn't just see anything like that recently, did we?
No, nothing at all.
First cousins in...
No powerful city has been torn down by incestuous thoughts between first cousins.
Rondalin, Fondalin, I can't remember what it was called.
Jondalin? That sounds right. Now, granted, this is like 3,000 years ago in Middle-earth time, but come on, man. I mean, it's kind of an important story for your family. You would probably remember how your ancestor became a planet.
Probably. And so, I mean, this was even against the law. I mean, written in the laws that even in the royal house, you can't be closer than second-degree cousins, which means that it would have to have been like, their kids could have, but not, the whole generational thing. I get confused with the cousins thing. But they're too close. They're absolutely too close. So then when they get married, he takes the scepter. Like, now I'm the king.
Right.
I guess. Okay.
Instead of being like, the consort to the ruling queen, he decides to become the ruling king.
Exactly. This isn't Prince Philip. This would be like Prince Philip trying to become the king.
Yeah.
Makes it just really a wrong thing here.
Yeah.
But it's interesting.
The people did follow him, didn't they?
Exactly. Well, they followed him because look at why they followed him. Go back a little bit. He was a leader in the wars, and he had won great renown as a captain. And when he came back, the hearts of the people turned to him because he brought great wealth and was for the time free in his giving.
Oh, so he bought them.
He did. He bought them. He brought them great wealth. And, the people, that's what they wanted, right? They were looking to find ways to enjoy the life they had, which was now getting shorter and shorter and shorter. And so they wanted stuff, and he brought them stuff.
Wow.
Just awful. So I'm going to go ahead and read a little bit here, and this is the last section of reading, and then we'll try to wrap this up. And sitting upon his carven throne in the city of Armenelos in the glory of his power, he brooded darkly, thinking of war. For he had learned in Middle-earth of the strength of the realm of Sauron, and of his hatred of Westernesse. And now there came to him the masters of ships and captains returning out of the east, and they reported that Sauron was putting forth his might, since Ar-Pharazôn had gone back from Middle-earth, and he was pressing down upon the cities by the coasts, and he had taken now the title of King of Men, and declared his purpose to drive the Númenóreans into the sea, and destroy even Númenor, if that might be. Great was the anger of Ar-Pharazôn at these tidings, and as he pondered long in secret, his heart was filled with the desire of power unbounded and the sole dominion of his will. And he determined without counsel of the Valar, or the aid of any wisdom but his own, that the title of King of Men he would himself claim, and would compel Sauron to become his vassal and his servant. For in his pride he deemed that no king should ever arise so mighty as to vie with the heir of Eärendil. Therefore he began in that time to smithy great hoard of weapons, and many ships of war he built and stored them with his arms. And when all was made ready, he himself set sail with his host into the east.
Man.
Wow. Dangerous road.
I'm sorry, just because it's right here in front of me, the heir of Eärendil. Well, Eärendil is watching down
rolling
from
over
the
in his
sky.
grave.
Yeah.
Rolling over in his airborne
in his
ship.
boat in the sky, watching all this, saying, "Dude, don't bring me into this at all."
Yeah, seriously, don't pin this on me, pal.
Right. This is not. And next time I'll talk a little bit about Ar-Pharazôn and Eärendil, because it's one of my favorite topics.
Yeah.
Man, I mean, what's Sauron to be his vassal? How do you think that's going to end?
Yeah, how's that going to work out for you, pal? There's only been one person who's had Sauron as a vassal, and that was, Morgoth of Vala.
Exactly.
Good luck with this.
Yeah.
But there's a little line here at the beginning that I think we both noticed, that we both were like, he brooded darkly.
He brooded darkly, yeah.
Why don't we pull those two references?
Who else do we know who's brooded darkly in the Silmarillion?
Who could have brooded darkly?
I don't know. Welcor?
Was it Welcor?
Jelcor? What was his name?
Melkor brooded in the outer darkness.
Thank you. Yes, and that's then, chapter 1, right?
Yeah, and then Mini-Me, Melkor's Mini-Me, Feanor, brooded in the dark after the Silmarils were taken. These days it's more like
that was chapter 9. That was the Silmarils. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
right.
Brooded in the outer darkness, and then Feanor brooded in the dark, and here he brooded darkly. I don't think these are coincidences, folks.
No. Tolkien does not usually
Especially
use
because
words
it's not
accidentally.
like brooded is something you see very often. Go ahead and do a word search.
It's not exactly on every page of this book.
It's not. It really isn't. A lot of the times
history repeats itself.
Yeah, it's a lot of times it's more like maybe the shadow brooded, but for the most time it's things about the brood of Glaurung.
Right.
Yes. Things like that. So, this is not a common word.
This is not an accident.
And there's a very good reason why Melkor, Feanor, and Ar-Pharazôn are the three people that brooded darkly or in the dark. Yeah.
Yep. History is repeating itself, and the fall that we are about to see, and I'm not spoiling anything because it is the title of the chapter.
Akallabêth.
The fall that we're going to see is a reflection of the fall of Feanor and the fall of Morgoth.
And that's the thing. The fall of Melkor in the very beginning was the first fall that created this fallen world, that created the corruption that's present. Then you get the fall of the elves, which came about because of Feanor.
Because of the fall.
And now we're going to get the fall of Númenor because of Ar-Pharazôn.
Right.
So, folks, if you're brooding in the dark, please snap out of it.
Stop brooding.
Just stop, please.
Stop brooding in the dark.
It's a bad thing. I mean, the best you can hope for if you brood in the dark is Morrissey. That's the best you can hope for.
That's not bad.
No, that's not
right.
bad. But really, I mean,
Yeah.
Sorry.
If you're I don't even know where to go from there.
I don't know where to go either. That kind of wrapped it up. Boom. We're done. Thanks very much for joining us on another episode. No.
But no, it's true. I mean, these guys just bring down their whole kingdoms, don't they?
Yeah.
It's again, it's all about your choices.
Exactly. Well, and similar things happen with both Melkor and Feanor and now Ar-Pharazôn here in the sense that he makes his decision without anybody's help. He makes his decision without counsel of anyone. Feanor, as we know, didn't listen to the counsel of anybody except for a little while from Nerdanel. That's it.
Yeah.
So, here he is. I mean, the Valar aren't going to give him counsel anyway. That ship has sailed.
True.
But,
and we're going to see that even though he, in the next part that we're going to read in our next episode, he is seduced by Sauron. But Sauron is playing off of things that are already there. It's much like the way Morgoth plays on things that are already there in Feanor.
Absolutely. It's so much easier to go after an existing weak spot than to try to, do a full frontal assault on something that, where he doesn't have a weakness.
Right.
So, the King of Men, isn't this fascinating? I guess Lord of the West isn't good enough. We want to be King
Lord
of
the West
Men.
and King of Men. So the West is mine and so is the East.
I named this unto myself and that unto myself.
You knew where I was going with that.
So, timeline-wise, just to put this in timeline, he set sail in 3261 to go have a chat with Sauron. Okay. So this is more than 3 millennia after Númenor was founded. So,
wow.
And believe it or not, that actually does wrap it up for another very long episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. As always, we do thank you very much for joining us, and we thank you for your patience.
As always. And join us again next time when we read the second half of the Akallabêth. We've been spoiling this all episode. The word means downfallen, so surprise, it doesn't end well.
Shocker.
I must say I like the Quenya name better, and we'll get that one soon.
Yes, we will. But let's not get ahead of ourselves any more than we already have. Remember, if you're reading along and like to take notes like we do, don't mark up those first editions or those special editions. Go to the official library tab on our website, theprancingponypodcast.com, where you can find links to cheap paperbacks of Tolkien's works, as well as audiobooks, music CDs, and a few other cool things for your Tolkien collection. And if you buy through those links, you'll even be helping to support the show without costing you a penny more.
And you can also support us by leaving a review on iTunes. Even if you don't listen to us on iTunes, you can leave us a review there. It only takes a few moments in an Apple ID. And thank you to those of you who've posted reviews. Some of you have said some wonderful things, and we really appreciate that.
Yes, and I'm sure you'll be sober by the morning.
And if you haven't done so already, you may also subscribe on iTunes or through your favorite podcast app. You can find our RSS feed on our website, or you can find us on Google Play, TuneIn, Stitcher, and most other podcast directories.
And I'll even add that subscribing to us on iTunes does help. It helps us with the weird, bizarre
algorithms that make us hard to find.
Seriously. So a big thank you to those of you who are connecting with us on social media. We set out to start a conversation that everyone could join. That's why we called this The Prancing Pony. And it's why we have the online common room on Facebook at The Prancing Pony Podcast and on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod.
And social media is a great place to share our podcast as well. So please retweet us, share us, and tell your friends.
Please, that's always such a big help to us. And one last thing as always, don't forget to send your questions, comments, or your top 10 anti-aging skincare secrets to the Prancing Pony Podcast at gmail.com, and we will try to get them into our next episode. Well, 2 hours and 40 minutes? Still far too short a time to spend amongst such admirable listeners. But until next time.
Farewell, friends.